We're live. What's going on, everybody? Hope everybody's having a good weekend. I'm going to try to share some of these links while people trickle in. Well, I guess I better get the link first. Well, I got a notification, so that was on YouTube. So at least the YouTube notification's working. I don't know if that's from Philbilly's page. Well, there's the other YouTube notifying me. So YouTube's working. But we get a lot of people telling me that you're not getting Facebook notifications, and neither am I. Going to put up my spectacles to see that. Yep, this should feel it. Now we just got another notification. What's that? Not even gonna tell me because I had the damn thing open. So I don't know. Got a few notifications. I'm not sure where, but hopefully they're all working. Some people tell me they're not getting Facebook notifications, and I don't think I got one that time. I know I got one from YouTube's. But let me share this out to the groups. Y'all know the drill. I did that. Be nice if I could consolidate all this into one big share. All right, let's see what we got here. All right. Every time I do this, I open it up Facebook, and there's always an article that I'd be interested in reading there, and I can't because I got to post all these links. And then when I go back to it, the page refreshes, and what I wanted to see goes away. I wish those pages wouldn't refresh like that. Y'all go run into that shit too. Like you see something good, you scroll down, you want to go back to it, and then when you do, it's freaking gone already. Yeah, that happens a lot. I wish there was just a button to hit. If you want to refresh it, hit this button, and it refreshes, and that's the way it works. You know? For those that hadn't looked, I wonder how many people saw Wayne's post from Ozark Wayne. He's got this flaring tool that he's come up with that pretty neat how it flares the copper out so you can put your ferrules in it. Pretty neat. Old Wayne's pretty sharp fella. I don't care what they say about it. The thing I like about it, when it's flared out like that, it raises the ferrule off the base of the, whatever it's on. In this case, I guess it's an infuser, not a diffuser, but it gives you a lot more room to put your clamp on. I thought that was pretty cool. Yeah, if y'all hadn't seen it, check it out. Go to ozarksteel.com and check out that flaring tool. Pretty slick. guarantee you there's a bunch of steel builders right now trying to figure out how to get Wayne to sell them one or build one themselves or buy one. So that is definitely a game changer. And I can't see if you're commenting, so don't get mad. I'm replying yet. I'm not able to see the page yet. I gotta get these links shared. I know that's the worst part of the whole damn thing is sharing these links out like that. I wish they made it a lot easier on us. Well, hang on, I'm glad you let me share the Brian LPR page that time. A lot of times it's when I'm getting towards the end that sometimes it allow me to put it on here now. Damn, it's letting me put a bunch more. Usually I'm stopped by now. Probably shouldn't say anything. Knock on some wood. Yeah, I shouldn't say nothing. Second I said that, next. Oh well. All right, let's see what's going on, Mark. Share Bitcoin to the world. Yeah, I wish I'd bought Bitcoin back in the day when I never had I never had a lot of faith in it. To be honest with you, there's nothing backing it. I always was a pessimist about it. What's going on, Mark? What's up, brother? What's going on, Tim? Don't know why you never respond to my comments. I was sharing the damn links. You know the drill. I share the links, brother. What's going on, Kimbo? Man, you didn't sleep tonight. I appreciate you, brother. What's going on, Mr. Claus? And no, that's not that's not me. That's not Shadow. That's different. He seems to be a pretty good fellow. What's going on, Brian? What's going on, Jason? No, I wasn't ignoring you, Mark. I was sending that link. Hell, I sent you while you was typing that probably. But I never had a lot of faith in Bitcoin. I mean, hell, I remember when you buy damn pizzas and shit with it. People were using it to buy pizzas with, and before that, on the what they call that? What was the name of the road? Road. It was underground. Everybody using to buy drugs with it. I can't remember nothing. Yeah, let's see what they called it. Silk Road. Yeah. I can't remember shit anymore. But yeah, Silk Road. Remember back in the day when a lot of people were buying from that for that. Welcome to the group, Linda. Good to have you with us. Damn, got a couple of new first timers on here. Heck yeah. Yeah, I tell you, we take it easy on everybody here. We don't, unlike a lot of the groups, not as the Silk Road, what they call it, Clint. Unlike a lot of the groups, you're not get ridiculed here. That's the reason that we're here is to educate people, teach people not necessarily the proper way. There's a lot of different ways that you can do it, but a good way to do it. And there's always good, better, best, and I try to teach what my opinion is the best way. Some people, might find differently, and that's their right to do. We're here for beginners, so we teach it from you know the first thing you should consider is what do you want to distill, what do you want to make, what do you want to do you have cheap access to fruit, do you want to use grains you don't know, uh, and what still to buy, and once you know what you want to make, that'll help guide you to what still you want to use to distill with. But there's a lot of tools and things that you're going to need. You're going to need something to ferment in. You're going to need a lot of basic fundamental tools that we can go over. I need to make a note of these things so I can just pop up a little chart and show pop up a chart. Kimbo's got a question. What can you tell me about using seasonings in the thumper like garlic, chicken, bouillon cubes, etc.? I was thinking about trying to make a shine for the 6 days. And I can tell you, I know absolutely nothing about putting spice or chicken or bouillon in that. I would say if that's what you want to do, make you a good chicken soup and eat and have you a good hot toddy right alongside it. Trying to mix up the two kind of makes the thing chicken and bouillon cubes and vodka. I don't know. I don't know, bro. You definitely think outside the box. That's for sure, brother. But yeah, I'd say hot toddies are generally a lot of times when you're sick. It's something that's been traditionally used, and that's basically warming up some tea, some whiskey, and some honey. Uh, that honey they say helps it linger on your throat a little longer. The temperature, get it warm enough, and it'll kill a lot of things on contact. And I guess the tea, green tea or something, help. Maybe it's a diuretic. I don't know. Yeah, Clint. Oh, this poster right there, baby. Anytime you want a link, though, at the very, if unless you're on a phone, maybe you're on a phone, but at the top in the address bar, you can just copy that and paste it anywhere you want. It should say https://streamyard.com, and then there's a bunch of numbers and stuff. Basically the same thing there. Um, yeah, sweet corn can get kind of expensive to buy. I mean, if you're in corn country, you can certainly use it. Um, for me, I love corn, so when I get sweet corn, it goes into the pot. It gets blanched, it gets put on ice, and it gets cut up and put in bags and put in the freezer, or it gets canned. Um, Using cheaper corn will produce just as good a shine. Now, I will say, using that sweet corn in an infuser or in your thumper to kind of infuse that flavor will help a lot. Chicken noodle. Well, they just make you some chicken noodle and take it with a shot of vodka, bro. But as far as seasoning, you'd waste a lot of seasoning in the distillation process. So much stuff is removed. I mean, that's the whole process. Like in distilling water, the whole process of distilling water is to remove impurities from the water. So when we do that, we leave a lot of stuff behind. So if you were to put a big bunch of garlic, big bunch of chicken and soup and all that, a lot of that wouldn't carry over at all. In fact, most of it won't. So it'd kind of be just a waste. But yeah, it's probably best to just do them side by side. But hot toddies have been really good. Been a pretty good thing. Your freezer's full already. Huh. Cool. So you got a freezer full of corn. That's awesome. Wait a minute. Clint, I shared the wrong link with you. Let me I damn it. Let me see. Did I share? Tell me I didn't do that. Hold on a minute. Oh no. Tell me. Okay, I did. All right. I was gonna say, holy moly. All right, let's see here. There. Yeah, that other link I gave you is on the StreamYard. Sorry, brother. I don't know. It didn't go to Hillbilly, so I don't know. Probably because it's the same link, maybe. Anyway, sorry about that. I don't know what the hell I was thinking. Uh, Damn, don't click that first link. That'll put you in the lobby here. I can't. What's going on, Leroy? But let me get back to Don or Dan. I'm sorry. I don't use a lot of sweet corn for it. Just as much, if not more, sugars from starchy corn. Believe it or not, once it's converted as sweet corn, and trying to deal with recouping the milk and dealing with that. Now, granted, they both have a lot of sugars. They're both perfectly fine. One, I've never really done a lot with sweet corn. It's always been kind of cost prohibitive, and I always ate it instead. I heard a lot of people use it. It's perfectly fine to use, but I would assume that you would cook it, and gelatinize it and treat it just like a field corn or an heirloom corn. Uh, but the most I've ever used uh, sweet corn, and I like to use cream corn, is in the infuser and in the thumper, to help carry that corn flavor over. Because once you mash it in and start distilling it, you're not going to get a real heavy, strong, like we were talking earlier. You're not going to get a heavy, strong flavor carry forward like they talk about on the show. It's when you distill stuff, you leave a lot of flavor behind. So it's not going to be a real slap in the face flavor unless you can infuse some flavor somewhere in the path of the vapor. So a lot of times people will put it in a thumper and use that to help infuse. And then, people have come up with different methods to use jar rigs. I use an inline infuser. Um, a lot of people, are using inline infusers nowadays. Um, but there's a lot of different ways to. Yeah, it was. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Tom. Yeah, base link is saying that is a broken link. Well, let me check one of the pages that I shared it to. Um, we'll have to see here. Yeah, now it's on the. Let me refresh the militia page. It's on the militia page, and that's using the same link. Take it directly off there, or actually, you may be able to go to the militia and get it from there. It may be, uh, maybe somehow. Let me send it to you in Facebook, Clint. How's that? That'll probably work a lot better. Let me try. Lord, Facebook's killing me. Hoops and upon hoops and jumping through hoops to get to the next hoop and the hoop that you want to be in the hoop. There, try that link. Yeah. Well, I'm not saying that you can't do it. There's a lot of people that do use the sweet corn. It just seems to me it's going to be harder to milk and get it all. It's not as much starch like in a sweet corn. It's all just the milk that you're going to be using. Um, I've been asked this several times, and I'll be honest, I've never bought a bunch of sweet corn just to ferment. It's always just been so daggone expensive. I can get 50 pounds for 7, 8 bucks of field corn, but 50 pounds of sweet corn, it'd be quite expensive. So I've always used canned corn, sweet canned corn that's not that great, or cream corn uh, in the infusers and thumpers. But well, I guess they're talking about fermenting corn just as a dish. I guess people eat fermented corn and soured corn. I guess I've always just done took the corn, convert the corn, and gone that route. I've never really, done sweet corn. Have you done sweet corn, Clint? But yeah, I love peaches and cream. What's going on up in Canada? Oh, you want a link for the YouTube? I can get you that, brother. Um, Subscribe to the Fieldbillies page or the militia page on here. Let me pull it up for you. And let me make sure that we are definitely live. But go to this page and click on subscribe. I'll send it to you on Facebook. I know. There you go. Yeah, I mean, as far as there's not a lot of starch, in a sweet corn. Basically, it's just the milk. So, is this something you gelatinize? I mean, I've never done it. I mean, I guess you could let it dry on the cob and dip and take and take it off the cob, but or I guess you just grind it up. I've heard of people just grinding cob and all up and doing it that way, and using the cob and the corn and all. I think Ian was talking about that the other day. Philbilly's brother from another mother was talking about, or maybe it was Philbilly was talking about it. One of them was talking about how they just, when it came to sweet corn, how they just grind it all up, cob and all, and just ferment that. But I've never, it's just always been too cost prohibitive for me, to get a few bushels of corn and just do sweet corn. I'm too cheap for that. Yeah, I guess you just have to use the corn milk, just the juice from the corn to get a decent gravity. I don't think there's a lot of starches in it to convert. I don't know how it was gelatinized. Um, yeah, if you don't add water, then it's going to scorch. You just have to steep it, and maybe just steep it at high temp. But I just don't know if there's a lot of starches in a sweet corn. I'm googling because I don't know how much starch is in a sweet corn. Yeah, not as much. Yeah, it's not going to have near as much the starch as just like a field corn. I would recommend if you got a lot of that corn, you can grind it all up, cob and all, and you're going to have to, like Clint was talking about, you're going to have to add a little bit of water to because just the juice from the corn alone probably not going to be enough to strain and press out. I'm not quite sure. I mean, I guess you could, cut it off the cob and maybe press the cob and get the juices out as best you could. If you had a really good press. Um, awesome, brother. Um, but it'd be, for me, it's just always been cost prohibitive. But I do know that it's great when you put it in the infuser and in the thumper. I like using sweet corn in the infuser and thumper. But best just use old field corn. It's designed. It's been selectively bred over the years to have a high content of starch, and that is basically for feeding animals, including ourselves. It's used in cornmeal, so it's just not animal feed. A lot of people say yellow dip number two is animal feed. It's not. It's used for that. It's used for chicken feed. It's used for cow feed. It's used for pig feed. It's used to make cornbread. It's used to make a lot of things. So it's human consumable, perfectly good corn. It's just a lot of people think just because it's not a sweet corn and it doesn't taste good when you eat it, it's not edible or it's not for humans. But that's not the case. It's for what it was, whoever buys basically what their intended use is. That's what it's for. Some people buy it to, make sweet feed. Some people buy it to, be silage for their cows. Some people buy it for chickens. Some people will buy it to grind up and make cornmeal. Some people will buy it to make moonshine. Some distilleries will buy it for whiskeys. It's just used for so many things. And it's yellow dip number two has traditionally been the corn, and it was selectively bred for high starch. And what we do is we found that we can take, like a cow's stomach, how the enzymes in their multi-chambered stomach can break down all those starches into sugars that its body uses to, give it energy. We can do the same thing with families that we use. So we gelatinize it, heat it up, and get it gelatinized, and that's basically getting all the starch out of the corn, hydrolyzed and out of the corn. And once we do that, then we add enzymes. And basic enzymes we use are alpha amylase and beta glucanase or glucoamylase. Um, let me show you. Here's a picture of three different types of starches. Your amylose, which is basically just imagine that just like a big old string of pearls. And it's just looping there. It doesn't connect here, but it's just looping around. And it's just like a chain of pearls. And each pearl is a glucose molecule. And what's holding those glucose molecules together is called a glycosidic bond. And so this is just a regular amylose, and this is an amylopectin. Both of these are very common in all the fruits and vegetables that we eat. Now, glycogen is something that we break down in our bodies, and insulin breaks down and we use in our bodies. So that's a different starch and different way we break it down. But The amylopectin and the amylose are the two of the most common that we run into in all the fruits and vegetables that we break down. Now let me bring another chart up and show. I like using these charts because it shows, illustrates how it looks when it's broken down. Now, when we use the alpha amylase, this right here is an alpha amylase string of amino acids. So, and they're held together by what's called a van der Waals bond. And these, once these amylase come into contact with this is, remember the amylopectin that's branched. This is an amylopectin that we're using as an example up here at the top. So as this alpha amylase comes into contact with the starches, it it breaks those bonds and it breaks off different little disaccharides, monosaccharides, trisaccharides, and oligosaccharides off these starches. So so basically those are breaking up and breaking. See, yeast can't eat those starches when they're in this form right here. They can't eat it. They can't wrap their mouth around it. They can't eat it from the middle, and they can't chew off little bits off each end over a long period of time. They don't work that way. So these have to be broken down into units of one or two. Now, certain types of yeast can take three, but it's one that takes a longer time. There is certain types of yeast that also include an amylase enzyme with them, like the yellow label, that's not required to have the enzymes. It's kind of built into the yeast. But for what we're going to talk about, we're not going to really go over that as much as just a typical yeast, right? So, in order for the yeast to be able to consume these, it has to be broken up into individual little pearls or two pearls together, or one or two pearls. So, or glucose molecules. So when we gelatinize that corn, we break out all these starches, these complex starches, and then we hit them with this alpha amylase. And you can see the little, if you look at the alpha amylase at the very top there, not the very tippy top, where it says starch, B amylase, and maltose, and oligosaccharides. Right below that, you'll see a small A amylase. That's alpha amylase. And you can see, if you look closely enough, I guess those with phones might not be able to see it as well. Let me see if I can enlarge that. Enlarge that. Let's see. Yeah, we did that one. That doesn't make it better. That just takes my ugly face out of it. That doesn't do much better. No, that's a little bit better there. Okay, so this alpha amylase, if you can see the little green, that shows where the bond has been broken, right? So some of those have two, some of them have three, some have four or more. So the only ones with those, yeah, somebody needs attention, I guess. Anyway, so where you see the green is where it's been broken up, and except right here, I guess there's one they didn't paint green. I guess they made a mistake. But the ones that are green and red, yeah, you can eat those. But the ones that have like four or five, still be consumed by your yeast. You use the glucoamylase right underneath it, where it made all of the green. So every one of them can be, consumed. And in the very top, you'll see the beta amylase and what it does. It took care of most of them as well, but still leaves a few undone. So basically, if you can use amylase, and then the what's going on here, Billy? Wow, 60-pound bag of flake corn for $16. That's awesome. The flake's really nice to use because you don't have to gelatinize it. It's already been gelatinized, so all you gotta do is heat it up to whatever temperature your alpha amylase wants, and just add your amylase and let it do its work and go from there. So that's another deal, brother. Awesome deal. That'd be good. That'd be good. I mean, if you like the molasses with it, now it makes it kind of a rummy taste, gives it a little bit different taste than what your typical, corn liquor is. But I like it. I use it in a lot of stuff too. But getting back to your sweet corn, uh, I guess you could treat it just like a starchy corn and try to get whatever that you can out. A lot of people, like I say, just chop cob and all up, heat it up to 190, let it thicken, use the alpha and the glucoamylase, and see what sugars you can pull out of what starches that it has in it. Um, I really wish I had shared that damn link. Sorry, brother, that's the wrong link. So and just do it that way like you would a starchy corn. But it's so much. This is an open mic night, bro. So I don't know why I hit the wrong button there. Maybe you got on there so you won't come back. Everybody's welcome to listen, but it ain't. I never post a freaking link. I'm definitely going to reveal that all night. Um, yeah, you want to use the alpha and the glucose. The alpha, like on the top here, is showing that it'll chop those up. That's cool, brother. No, I don't have open night. Ask me questions here in chat. I accidentally posted that link. I'm sorry, but yeah, just ask me questions here, bro. Bye. Don't get butthurt, man. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to post that link. You can do like everybody else and ask the questions in here. I didn't mean to post that link for everybody. That's for Clint, and I posted the wrong link. But don't get mad. Hang around and ask your questions. We'll talk about brewing fruit. Oh well, but yeah, hillbilly. Yeah, once you use the alpha, it debranches really well, but it still leaves some oligosaccharides that the yeast can't eat. So using that glucoamylase is very critical. That or the beta, if you got some malted grains, does a pretty good job, but nothing does as good a job as the glucose. It does a better job than beta glucanate. There's also an alpha D glucanase. That's interesting. It just strips one off the outsides. There's some different enzymes in showing over here and how it affects it. But yeah, the alpha gluco is a really good combo for using malts. Yeah. He probably didn't get set. He clicked that link to jump in here. I guess he wanted to jump on stage and ask questions. And I know a lot of people watch the shit show and they think that it's open for that, but you know, I don't, I don't do it that way. And they sent a couple of private chat messages I didn't see either. I'm sorry about that. I don't look at those private chats. Um, but don't get mad, man. Just ask you if you got questions. Just ask me, brother. That's what we're here for. But Scottish style, I'm probably not very versed on, you know, any particular style like that. You may want to, I guess we'll use that one. So let's see. Zoning chat brewing via fruit. Man, I guess he's gone. Oh well. I guess we'll have to find his answer somewhere else. Sorry about that. I mean, I didn't mean to put him on stage there. I was trying to remove him, and I just thought if somebody saw that link, it was a troll. But yeah, the steam rolling process heats that corn up to high enough a temperature that it gelatinizes it when it gets steamrolled. So it's good to go. Now you'll still need alpha. It's been gelatinized, but it hadn't been debranched by alpha enzymes. So you'll still have to, you know, debranch it with alpha and then use your glucose. But the flaking process with the steam rolling that just replaces heating the corn up to 190 for 90 minutes. That's what, you know, having that done replaces that part of the process. You'll still need to heat it up and add alpha. So if you use a powder, you go to 155, 150, 155 and add your powder. Or if you're using the high temp alpha, you just heat it and your water up to 185 and then just start mixing in your alpha amylase, stir it up real good and give it time to break everything down and do it the same way, you know. I actually, Hillbilly, if I used to use both too. Uh, and I still, even if I'm using the beta, you know, the beta and the alpha that are endogenic from the malt, I'll still, you know, use a little liquid alpha and some liquid glucose on it to just make sure that I get a good conversion. How's it going, Cowboy? So even though I'm using, you know, malts, I'll still use a little bit just to help it along. Awesome, stick around. We'll help you. So I'm going to try to. We got a couple of newcomers in here that's never done it, so I'm going to try to go over it again from beginning to end. And where was the one I had? Oh, this, I had one a minute ago. Maybe it's that. Yeah, that's the one. Yeah. So we're going to try to kind of go over things. You know, first of all, when you're new and you got to decide what you're wanting to make. So if your goal is to make like a vodka, you know, you're going to want to kind of go towards a column type style. Yeah, me too, Scott. I use it even if I'm using the malts. You know, I'll use less, but I'll still use it. I also throw a little bit of that powder in there, that powder alpha, so I can get rid of it. I use it every time just so I can be done with it. At 155, I'll throw a teaspoon in there every damn time. So it's gone. I just can't throw it away. I'm stupid. That's just how cheap I am. But so for a lot of beginners, a bever still is going to be an option. A keg is going to be an option. If you do decide that, copper, is another option. But for most hobbyists, I'd say, 30 gallons is about generally the upper limits of a beginner, you know, that's serious. But most beginners begin somewhere between 10 and 20. That's a good starting point gallon wise. That's some start with a 5 gallon and immediately, love the hobby and they're like, damn, next thing you know, they're buying another steel. So they're wondering what they can do with, yeah, that's like that. So, anywhere from 10 to 20, is going to be a good starting size steel. A keg is perfectly in between those at 15, unless you get a small keg. But you can beer keg and take the spear out. See, I remember spear today. Take the spear out and clean it out real well, and you can attach a little whiskey head to that and a condenser, and you're off to the races. So you can distill in something simple as that, or you put your little column on there and get your little higher proof if you're wanting some higher proof stuff, making vodka and things like that. But a bever, is a pretty good option, and a keg probably the two best options, or a little copper steel. Those are nice as well. A little more maintenance, a little more upkeep, and actually a lot more than the stainless. Which stainless basically, rinse, wipe, and done. With copper, there's going to be some more maintenance involved, and when it oxidizes, you're going to have to remove some of the oxidation and things like that because sometimes they build up some oxidation and it turns green. And when you run liquid, it comes out bluish green, and it's somewhat toxic. So you don't want to drink that, and it's probably a little more upkeep than a beginner would want. But it does make very good liquor, some of the best liquor. So you can't deny that. But they found ways recently that you can put like copper mesh in the vapor path, and there's a lot of different manufacturers of copper mesh. It's used for a lot of different things, but you want to get the copper mesh that's pure copper and not copper plated steel. Um, so you can put that in the vapor path, and basically what the copper does in distilling, it removes sulfites. And sulfites basically, sulfur. It's a form of sulfur, and sulfur doesn't taste good, it doesn't smell good, and it's not something that you want. So this helps remove it from your paper. Right. 1 pound of sugar, 1 pound. If you convert your corn, it's going to be okay with the 111. You do a pound of corn per gallon of water. You cook it, you convert it, and then after that you add a pound of sugar to make up the difference. Or you can start with 2 1/4, 2.5 pounds of corn per gallon of water and convert it, and you may not need any sugar at all. Um, but a 1-1-1 ratio, it cooking it 1 pound of, of corn and gelatinizing it and then converting it is much easier for a beginner because it doesn't get real thick. And a lot of times beginners scorch because they try to cook it, and it just gets really thick if you do 2.5 or 3 pounds, like I do per gallon. It gets really thick, and if you're cooking it, a lot of times it will scorch really easily on you. So, the 1-1-1, a lot of people recommend just a pound of corn, a gallon of water, heat it up, convert it, use your alpha, use your glucose, and then at the end add a pound of sugar, and that'll bring your gravity up to 1070, 1080, and you're good to go. Right? But you can do it, like I say, you can take a gallon of water and 2.5, 2 1/4 pounds of corn and cook it up, gelatinize it, bring it down glucose, and you can get a 1.6, 1.75, somewhere in that range, just by doing that, and you won't have to add any sugar at all. So to make a little smoother shine for you, starting with 10 gallons. Well, it depends on what your distillate is. If you've already got a 10-gallon still, that's cool. What kind did you get? And also how much you get will depend on how the basic proof or ABV of the alcohol in the mash that you started with. So if you get a 1080, and that's based roughly, let's just say 10% for easy math, and you got 10 gallons, 10% of 10 gallons is a gallon. So in total, there'd be a gallon of alcohol in it, but you're not going to get a gallon out. A lot of that's going to get thrown away with the heads and pours. A lot of that will be in your tails, and then a lot of that will be mixed with water as it comes out. So if you could fractionally distill it all, or if you could get it all and remove all the water from, then if you got it every bit out, which really you can't do it because it's an azeotrope, but 50% you would have close to a gallon. So, but with a 10-gallon on a normal run, you can expect about, I guess, maybe a gallon of good hearts, and then maybe once you proof that down, depending on how much you proof it down to, you maybe get a gallon and a half of a decent proof liquor. I do mine is 18 and a half, and I generally do about 15, and I'll get two, sometimes a little over two out of it. About a couple gallons of decent, and after it's proofed, maybe back to two and a half. So maybe half that. Yeah, you can expect, I guess, about it. But some people say 50 milliliters or something per gallon, and I think that's just a general rule. But like if you're making a brandy, you're going to have a little bit more pour shots. If you use pectic enzyme to help break down your fruits, you get even more, a bit more heads. Um, but learning to make cuts, like Clint's talking about, is going to be the most critical things. Really, it's not something that's going to be pre-measured. I've got a chart here I can show you, but it's never going to be exactly like this. So this is just a typical run to show you how much heads and how it trails off and gets into your hearts, and then once you get to your tails, how that comes in. Disregard the temps at the top. I'm going to cut that out eventually. But this chart never holds true to every distillate that you run, and it changes. There's so many things that can influence it. Just stressed yeast can cause more heads, you know, and things, or too much heat or too much acid can stress your yeast and increase the amount of heads it causes. So there's a lot of different factors that can go into it and create more heads. Again, making a brandy versus a grain versus a sugar shine will definitely have a big impact on how much heads you're going to have. Yeah, I like the steep. Definitely, I like the steep. But getting back to you, so if you have a 10-gallon still, you're only going to be able to run 7.5 or so, 7.5 gallons of it. So out of seven, you're going to get maybe a gallon and a quarter. If you had a pretty decent starting gravity and you run down to the tails, but save your tails because the next time you run it, you'll get more volume because you'll recover, a lot of that pale blue or the light blue from 15 to 20. You'll recover a lot of that light blue if you save your tails and run it again. Did you already get a steel, Dan, or are you just thinking about getting a 10? Or 'cause we could definitely. help you on some recommendations that'll save headaches. Yeah, I like steeping too. So Dan, have you already picked out a steel? I'm trying to scroll back and let's see who was also talking about being new at the beginning. Dan, I'm sorry, Trill. I did not see this post until I just scrolled back. Getting ready to make a 4-berry mash. Need some good advice. I'm so sorry, Trill. I'm just scrolling back looking to see who it was that said they were a beginner and saw that. That's the first damn time I saw that. Maybe it happened when I was dealing with Tro. I was scrolling back to see who. Um, Linda and Dan. Okay. I'm sorry, brother. I missed that. Um, what berries you got going? I'm sorry. I totally missed you, Trill. I wasn't ignoring you, brother. I just did not see that until I scrolled back. So let me scroll down and get you in. And they gone. Okay, left me, Trill. Man, I'm sorry. I got to try to do better, but I did not see that. I don't want, hey, if y'all ask a question and I don't acknowledge it, don't be afraid to ask it again, and again and again until I see it. Because if I scroll down and something, I just totally missed Trill's question there. So ask it again and again and again. If you're not happy with the answer, say I'm still a little bit confused. You know, what is the biggest beginner mistakes? I would say the biggest beginner mistake I see is buying a steel before getting advice. That's the first, maybe not the biggest, might be the biggest mistake, but it's the first. A lot of times it's so there's some steels out there that are really cheap. When we talk about beavers, like the 3-pot steels, they do a good job once you work on them. They're going to require a little bit of work. Some the gaskets aren't the best and most reliable. The plumbing's a little bit undersized, and the condenser is grossly undersized. And if you don't do the little thumper that comes with it right, it just ends up being a little slobber box, and that doesn't really help. I mean, it helps if you puke over, which a lot of beginners do. They overfill the steel because they don't realize how much foam. But I mean, you can't even boil water to make eggs. Just to boil eggs, you just put water in a pot and boil it. What happens? That shit's gonna foam up on you, right? Well, you can imagine what a beer is gonna do when you put it in a pot, right? So when you put that mash in there, which is basically a beer, right? You're gonna get some major foamage. So yeah, you can degas it, but yeah, you don't want to fill it up too far. You get puking over, and that becomes a big problem. I would say that's another big beginner mistake. But I would say, awesome, Dan. That's great, brother. You got a good start then. I hope you got that advice here. That was good advice. Uh, if you can, my biggest, I used to run a keg steel for a long, long, long time. Many, many, many. My biggest issue with the keg steel was its difficulty to clean out. Now, I didn't have a pressure washer, and back then I, I didn't know they even had the rotary ends that you can put on your pressure washer that shoots out of the side and angles it. So I ended up having to run mine until it got filthy, and I'd have to take it to a car wash. And I'm sure everybody, I didn't use the soap, I just did the rinse cycle. I'm sure everybody wondered what the hell I was doing cleaning out my beer keg, you know. But but if you could get a maybe a 3 or 4 inch ferrule, uh, not mess with your 2 inch on the very top, but like on the side top, not on the side, but like on the top, you know, just below that. Get a little 3 inch. That way, maybe you get your girlfriend's arm. I can't get my arm in a 3 inch, but somebody could get their arm in there and clean it out a little bit and scrub, you know, if you need to, would help a lot. You know, that was my biggest qualm with when I was using a cake steel, just a pain to clean. But now that you get, you know, larger ferrules welded on there for clean outs and for filling, oh yeah, it's made it better. So you got a great start. So now basically learning the mash. You know, and we'll go over every bit of that tonight. Yeah, yeah, I think you did good. So you didn't make the first mistake. You know, that's the biggest first mistake a lot of people make is, and you know, it's not a huge mistake. I won't say that buying the little 3 pot deals. At least they got into the hobby, and I won't say it's a mistake. It's just with a little more guidance, they could have bought, you know, something that would be a little bit easier for them to use and probably a little less frustrating. I think a lot of people with these little 3 pots, it, it doesn't turn out well. They get leaks from vapor, which causes, you know, reduced amount of liquor coming out, and it's not as good a quality, and they fall out of the hobby because, you know, all of a sudden the valves are breaking and or the gaskets are breaking on them, and they don't know where to find new gaskets. And their first run didn't turn out well, and it tasted like shit. And you know they didn't know how to make the cuts, and you know just mixed everything in together, and you know didn't you know really do a lot of homework and stuff. And those are the people that'll do a run or two, and then they'll put their still on eBay or give it to a friend or you know throw it away or use it for good pots or whatever. But you know, asking questions is you know a lot of people make the mistake of trying to do it without getting help. Um, that was me, you know, back when I did it in the '70s when I first started doing it. I was young. There's no Foxfire book was about all I had to work with. And it gave me a couple of crude, you know, recipes to make mash with and stuff, and taught you the principles. But that was pretty much it. You know, you learn on your own, making mistakes. Yeah, yeah, the copper steels are definitely the best. They're by far the best steels. Um, but you know, it's a little maintenance involved, and I would recommend it for you know green pea. You know, because of that. Yeah, turbo yeast is a mistake. Um, Turbo yeast is a yeast that also includes the yeast nutrients with it, and it was basically geared for using with just pure sugar and a sugar wash for fuel making. Um, and it probably has too much nutrients in it, which kind of gives an off flavor. And it's probably not the best yeast to start with. I don't think that it's been something that's been selectively bred like a Saccharomyces cerevisiae bayanus, which is a EC1118, which is probably all around one of the better ones to use if you're just going to buy one. Lalvin EC1118, uh, probably one of the best, most tolerant to pH swings, temperature swings, alcohol tolerance. It's probably one of the most forgiving out of all of them. So I recommend that to a lot of beginners. And it'll ferment dry, and it's pretty vigorous, and it's really good at unsticking stuck fermentation. So it's good at that. A lot of beginners get stuck fermentation. So question: would running the pot fast and hold it high temp and extra filtered into the pot until it reaches 155 ish. Does that cook off any four shots? Ran for a while, 10 gun bucks. So, at 155, let me show you a chart here and I'll explain why. This chart isn't very big. Hopefully it's bigger on yours than what it on mine. At 155 degrees, that's not even getting close to the boiling point of ethanol. Um, Ethanol, if pure, if you look at the very bottom of the chart, go up to about 173.1, which is the boiling point of ethanol, and you'll see that little dot over to the right. Now that's if it's 100. Well, let me take your question off here so we can see the bottom of the chart. Uh, so this is 100% alcohol, not proof, but percent. 100% alcohol is 200 proof, but we know that you can't get to that without you know sieves and molecular sieves and things like that. So because it's an azeotrope, or because it's hygroscopic, once once pure ethanol touches the air, it sucks moisture out of the air and literally bonds to the like a desiccant. And it is a desiccant. That's what hygroscopic means. It's a desiccant. So it sucks water out of the air and cuts itself down to, about, 98% or 196 or 8 proof, something like that, in that range. But at that proof, it'll boil at 173.1 degrees, right? But as you add water, it changes the boiling point, and that's why we can't crack stainless steel. It's because it's the ethanol, the ethyl acetates, the acetone, a lot of the other compounds, and water are all what's called an azeotrope. And what happens with azeotropes, once you mix them together, the boiling point changes, right? So at the low end of this scale, we see 0 on the bottom, and over on the right, we see 210. Well, actually, water boils at 212, which is where it would cross that line a little bit above that 210. But because there's still alcohol in there, because it's azeotropic, and it will not all go away on either side. So that's why that chart doesn't actually come to that line and make a dot. But anyway, once you add alcohol to water, you lower the boiling point of the water. Once you add water to alcohol, you raise the boiling point of the alcohol. So somewhere in the middle is where you'll see the ethanol vapors coming off you. So if you had a 40%, which is 80 proof, look at the 40 on the bottom chart. You would have to go up where it crosses the line. You'd have to be at about 183 degrees before you get some ethanol boiling on. And that's the highest proof you ever want to go in a still. It's dangerous. So if most mashes, if you look at this bottom row again, most of your mashes are 10, which is 20 proof, right? So you'll get somewhere on each side of the 10. Sometimes you'll get to 12 and a little higher, but most times around there. So your boiling point, if you go straight up from that, if it's 10, you're going to be about 196. 12, right about 195. So you're going to have to get to about that temperature before you'll see any kind of foreshots or anything begin to cook off. Um, Now, that's not saying in a pot something's not going to cook off, because if you look at the pot dynamics of it, all right, you've got a pot full of water here. Okay, you've got let's just say you got a propane flame hitting the bottom of your pot, right? The liquid that comes in contact at the very bottom of that pot's going to be, sometimes it's going to be 195 degrees, and so is that little bit of liquid right above that pot, right? So it's going to be a lot hotter than what's in the top of the steel, right? Of course, because it's closer to the heat source, right? And it's closer to where that heat's hitting the pan. So you may see some bubbling and some action going on down low, and you might see a little smoke, or a little fog or a little vapor kind of on top of your steel if it's at that point. Um, and you may get a little bit off, but it is being brought to this temperature at 190, 190 plus for it to do that. But it's just happening down there at the very bottom, and it bubbles through, and it'll, kind of gas off. Now, if you had it stirring, it would keep it a lot cooler at that bottom, and you wouldn't get that, you wouldn't get that happen. So I've seen a lot of people that I say this to, they're going to be like, well, I'm going to test him and see if he's right. And they're like, and they come back like, no, he was wrong. I saw it bubbling at the bottom. It was bubbling, and I got a little bit of, something come off the top. It was 185. It was 185 where you stuck the thermometer in the top, but down in the very bottom next to that pot that the gas is hitting, it's 196, 198, and it's a lot hotter. That's why it's doing that. So um, that's why it's probably not going to help at 155. But a lot of people do that when, like, if they're distilling on the grain, cowboy, so they can continuously mix and until they start to get a little bit of a roll, where something happens, where they start getting some boiling action and rolling, and then by that time you will be up to your 190, mid 190s to 200, and then you will probably get some of the gas off. If you're outside, it's probably not as big a deal. If you're in an enclosed place, probably not the best idea. But then you'll get some. A lot of people that ran submarine pots back in the day would leave that cap off, and they'd have a boat paddle in there, and they'd be stirring that some bitch up, keep it from scorching. Because like if they did it, they'd ferment that some bitch and still in it too, and they'd have to stir the hell out of it until it got rolling. And that was one of the benefits of the shapes of the submarine pot is it would add a really good roll once it got to the boil, and it would keep stuff stirring up to where it wouldn't, scorch a lot. So, okay. What's going on, Brian? Yeah, man, pretty good weekend. How about yourself? I got you, bro. Yeah, I figured. But yeah, I agree, Clint. If stainless steel was available and cheap and readily, hammerable and malleable and easily, joined and soldered, everybody would use stainless. Nobody, But to be honest, most people didn't even use copper back then. I'll be honest with you. Most people use oil drums. That's the sad truth of it. You look around and a lot of the old steel sites now good moonshiners would use a copper steel. But most of them really didn't give a shit about your health. They didn't give a shit about you. It was all about the Benjamins making money, and they used oil drums. That was what they could get cheap and easy. It was easy to cook. They'd get cast iron radiators in houses. The old steam radiator. They'd get those houses as condensers. They'd use car radiators. They'd use galvanized. They'd use anything they get their hands on. They didn't. I'm not so much that they didn't care. They didn't know. They didn't know much about metal ions and how that impacts the body and all that stuff. But they just did what was cheapest and easiest, and a lot of times that was a 55-gallon drum, and they put it in the fire, cook the paint off of it, and clean it up best they could, and start making liquor. I guess the first few runs taste a little oily. After that, to be good to go, right? But that back in the day is, that we were probably drinking out of leaded pipes and stuff too. So a lot of people didn't know about all that then. But I'd say I agree with Clint. Yeah, if they'd have known and they had the copper mesh, or they've been using copper rashi greens, for a long time, but the copper mesh and stainless is a good, cheap alternative. I mean, there's no replacing a good copper or steel, but there's a lot of maintenance that goes along with it. So for the hobbyist, probably pot's going to be the best thing. And the copper mesh is going to be good. Or use the copper pot. They're not really that bad to keep care of. I would, I'd rather clean a copper pot than try to clean a worm. Worms are hard to clean and keep clean once they get green inside. It's a lot of work getting all that out of there. A copper pot, you can take the cap off, scrub it, clean it. Use your citric acid and clean all the green, and do the same with the cap. And all that's fine. But try to clean the worm like that. So I'm missing stuff here. RC. Is there a difference between adding boiling water to crack corn in a barrel, sealing it to steep, versus boiling water, adding corn to cooking versus not? If you can, maintaining the temperature, cowboy, is the main thing. Uh, it technically you don't have to maintain the 190. You can let it cool down to 170, 165, but you have to add hours. Every 10 degrees or so, you're going to have to add hours to its steeping time, right? So to accelerate the gelatinization process, people do the 190 for 90, or 2 hours, an hour and a half, 2 hours at 190. Um, but you can do it cooler, but it takes exponentially longer. So it takes a lot longer to do it at cooler temperatures. I think down to like 45, 55 is the lowest gelatinization point. Let me see. There's a chart here. It's got it on there. Got a chart for everything. I like having charts to describe things because it saves me a lot of time and trouble. I wish my damn thing was bigger here. I can't hit. Let's get my magnifying glass to see here. Okay, let's see. Yeah, you could go out down to about 145, 55, and still, gelatinized corn, but it'd probably take 12, 16 hours. Who knows? I've never tried it, but again, it actually used to be how you would have to do it if you malted the corn, right? You would have to cook it at that really low, low temperature before all the enzymes and all that came about. If you just malted corn and you wanted to cook it and you wanted to gelatinize it and you wanted to cook it itself, you would have to do that at 155 degrees for hours and hours and hours and hours and hours, many, many hours. It was very tedious, slow. That's why nobody does it. It's just, but really not a lot of difference except risking the scorching, and having something. If you have a good cooler, a big gas cooler, or if you can insulate, like get a 55-gallon barrel and cut the top out of it, and then get like a 42 that's taller and a little more narrow, and stick inside there and squirt your foam in there, or shove foam in there, or whatever, just to insulate. That works. A cooler works best if you just got one of them big ass, fisherman coolers or camp coolers that go on the boats and stuff. They put the big ass fish in, and 120 quart coolers. What's that? 30-gallon cooler or something like that. Those work best, for holding temperatures, maintaining temps. But I always keep, I always use about 75%, 80% of the water initially, and then I keep a few gallons aside. And as it cools off, cowboy, I'll just add a pot at a time and stir it in real good just to help maintain those temperatures while I'm steeping. And I think that's going to be about the best way to do it. And do the steeping method. I like steeping a lot better because the one of the biggest ways you could screw up, another big mistake first timers, is scorching the corn. Cooking it too hot, too fast, and scorching it. And once you scorch it real bad, it's hard to clean the pot. You'll never get the taste out. So it's just a sacrificial run. You you kind of screwed it up. You can finish the process, and if it's your first time, then you can run that as your sacrificial run. But it's going to taste like shit, and you want to rinse everything out afterwards. But it'll be a good sacrificial run and learning mistake. Yeah, you want a 304 or better. What does everyone do for the winter? Shut down or keep mash indoors? Um, you can do it inside, brother. I mean, I'm not going to tell anybody to distill inside. There are some inherent risks in that, especially for beginners. You definitely, want to make sure that you don't have any leaks anywhere. 'Cause there's some vapor leaks, and we've got, a lot of people say, "Oh, well, it's hard to, be a fire hazard with steel. It's almost impossible to catch fires and do all these things." Don't listen to them. They're not. They're not. They're lying. They're disingenuous. They just don't know. We've got a buddy of ours named Mark Field. I don't know if you see him on a lot of the podcasts and stuff. He's on the shit show. He's on Phrase a lot of times. Colin Captain Field, he's a great guy from out west, and he likes to make he likes to run a little bit. And he's got one little 3 pots and the beavers. And well, he's a different steel now. I think he's running a cake steel now, but he was running the beverage time. They got those little clasps that clasp the lid down and snap it, tight. And one of those little rings came out of the clasp on the side of the clasp. It clasped down properly. And he had his steel running. It was going. He walked out to have a cigarette or whatever, and it boiled over and it spewed flames. And when he came, his whole roof was the whole building in his shop or his garage was fire. And fortunately, he had a fire extinguisher, and he was able to put everything out, get it turned off, immediately turned it off first, and got everything pulled out and got a few scorched boards, but managed to save everything other than make a huge mess. So, lesson to everybody. It can happen. So doing it inside has inherent risks involved, and you can't be drinking when you do it. You got to be sharp, and it's like walking around an airplane before you drive it, or a truck, or heavy equipment. You got to check everything before you do it. And while you're doing it, same thing with steel. Safety is one of the most important things, of course, and that's what we try to point out on every angle that we can is what might be dangerous. This could be a problem, and anytime you run inside, it can be a problem. That being said, if you do everything properly, it can be perfectly fine. But make sure you have good airflow. Um, as far as fermenting inside, not a problem. Vapors from it's not a problem. He was, oh, the carbon dioxide buildup. Man, you would have to have 1,000,000 of them barrels and be sleeping on it basically before you're going to, vacate all your oxygen and fill it the house full of CO2. But for small time people that are reasonable, it other than the odors, some some mashes smell good, some not so good. So yeah, mashing inside's fine. But running it, you don't want to run it outside in the cold. There's some issues with that. You get a lot of reflux, a lot of issues. If you have a little shine shack, once you get out there and start running, it'll help heat up the shack, and yeah, you can heat that up, and it'll be just fine. But I'd rather somebody lose a storage building than a house. Right? So I'm not going to tell anybody to run inside because it's just a liability thing, and I don't want anybody, I don't want anybody's house burning down and all that just for a hobby and making liquor. But insulated box with the fish tank heater and a mash barrel that works. Um, no, your mash if it gets down to 60, it doesn't ruin. It just goes into hibernation, kind of your yeast. kind of hibernate. They just get very low producing, and once it gets to a certain temperature, yeah, it'll probably kill them off. But they're pretty, you know. I shouldn't say kill them off, but just make them probably because you can freeze your yeast and thaw it and use it still. So, but the cooler it gets, the less effective it's going to be, and down to 60, it's not going to work hardly at all. Um, but just keeping it in a room that's heated. I use. Have you ever seen the oil filled little radiators that are electric? They're thermostatically controlled. I just put those right in the middle. I've got my 40-gallon, 30, 40-gallon barrels, the blue barrels and stuff. I'll just set those barrels in a semicircle or circle, three of them, four of them, whatever, and I'll put that little oil furnace that's in the laundry room down here in the basement. I'll just put that little oil heater right in the middle of all of them, and just kind of adjust the temperature. I can adjust it by moving them in and out, further away from it if it gets a little warm, or a little closer if it's not warm enough, or I can adjust the temperature on the oil, heater, and those do just fine. I've seen a lot of people using the fish tank heaters. I've seen a lot of people pull fish tank heaters out with scorched corn and grains stuck to it too, and I've seen that happen a lot. Um, I've seen people try to use little screen cages around them to kind of help keep them separate from the grain and stuff, and the mash, depending on whatever you got mashed in. And it works. I'm not going to say it doesn't. I've seen a lot of people doing it and had some success with it, but I just, the little oil filled things are good, and it helps keep the basement warm and the room warm and the furnace, everything at a good temperature. So it's not like it's wasting electricity. It helps keep my basement warm in the winter, whereas my heater doesn't do a good job down here because all the heat rises, and so I just use that little oil filled jewel, and it does fine. I tend to agree with you, brother. I've seen some of the cheap China stainless delaminate, and it looks like pure stainless to me. I've not seen that with beverage, but I've seen some of the Chinese stainless pots delaminate, and it was got too hot. They ran it too hot, or they ran it dry, and I've seen it. It looked like stainless that I've ever seen, do. So be wary what you get. You never know. Yeah, yeah. Like Clint said, there's I've seen a lot of people doing it small scale. They use little seed mat warmers, little seed warmers, or heating pads. What's going on, Shadow? Uh, I tell you, if you've got a decent size, ferment, those oil fields are pretty damn cheap. They work real well, pretty efficient, and it helps keep the whole room warm. Which may be something that you don't want to do if you don't want to keep the whole room warm. That's considered a waste to you. Maybe consider something smaller. But yeah, you can wrap them up. I, I I've never had any issue just using that little oil radiator, and other than they don't last but a few years. That's not an issue. But they're thermostatically controlled, and they're pretty accurate, and I like that about them. But I've seen a lot of people use the fish tank heaters, and it does work just fine if you can keep it away from the grain and stuff. And I've seen a lot of people scorch with them, and that's some, if you got a lot of expensive grains in there, some heirlooms or something, you know, I've never had any issue just using that old radiator. And I mean, I'll have two or three little 30-gallon, 40-gallon, garbage cans. Kind of like a garbage can. They're used. They actually barrels used. These were medicinal. Um, they're food grade. I went and bought them. They were cheap as hell, and they did a good job. Cold as hell up there. So, what's your average inside temperature, Brian? Yeah, mid-fives. They rusted quick, and you know it. But they didn't know. They didn't know that the metal ions were coming off and that weren't good and ruining their liquor and hurt people. Nobody knew about that shit. Like I said, at the same time, we had plumbers everywhere in the United States using lead solder. At the same time, it's probably as bad or worse than using a steel drum. But yeah, that's what they used back then. It was cheap, common, and probably as good as it as the other stainless chinas. But what's your average temperature in your house right now, Brian? All right, let me scroll. I'm getting behind a little bit here. Yeah, yeah. Sometimes you have to go inside, man. I know it's getting pretty hot around here. That's why I was complaining about Wednesday. It's like fuck this year, man. It's kind of been weird. It's spring and it was like 50s and 60s. And I'm like, can't wait to get me to go out and do some, farming. And you get out of this house and wait for it to warm up. Oh man, it's almost 70. And all of a sudden it goes from 60 average to 85, 90 average. And like, man, what happened to my, 80 during the day, 60 at night, 70 average that I could just, work with? I didn't get much of that. So, yeah, you just don't keep your barrels in direct sunlight. It's a cold area, and you want it to get like Clint was talking about, the darker the barrel, those black barrels are pretty deep in the wintertime. If you want to, put them in the direct sunlight, they can get some heat, but at night, it's going to be a roller coaster ride for the yeast. They're not going to like it. Yeah, get you a beer keg, brother. That'll double almost double what you're doing. But what's your yeah? Because right now we're talking about trying to keep the mash warm. They're talking about using insulating it, not cooking, but just keeping it warm during the fermentation process. And I think didn't you use a water fish aquarium heater? I think Julia's used a fish heater for a while. I've never used them. I like just using the old radiator works pretty well. It's simple. And like I say, Brian, it'll help keep the house warm. So what kind of heat do you use in your house, Brian? I'm gonna scroll down for your answers. 65 to 70 in your house. Rains a lot, yeah, yeah. Um, I would say, if you could wood heater, I would say, if you could find a place closer to the source, where your wood stove, where it's not too hot or not too cold. I know what you said, 60 to 70 ambient throughout the house. maybe a little closer to the wood stove than that, and use wine yeast. It may take a little longer, but it can tolerate those low temperatures a lot better and actually prefers them. So an EC 1118 would work real well with lower temperatures like that. It's a champagne yeast. So what's going on, Papa? Yeah, I'd say doing that. Now let me scroll back up so I don't see if I missed something. I don't want to miss somebody's question. Um, no, let's see. Yeah, you might need a glycol chiller out there. It's so damn hot. Definitely, or in the shade for sure. I get a lot of people doing that. Like, I don't know why my fermentation's stuck. And I'm like, what? Well, tell me about it. Well, I don't know if outside. Well, how hot is that outside? Oh, 85, 90. Like, is your fermentation barrels out in the sun or in the shade? Yeah, they're out in the sun. And, take a temperature of it, midday and see what the temperature is inside. 120. Them barrels get hot, bro. Yeah, step mashing. What do you do with your corn though when you step mash up? Do you just do your corn separate, Scott, and then just combine it when you're done? All right, Dan. All right, brother. Thanks for stopping in. We're on here every Wednesday and Saturday, so at 8 o'clock. So jump in and we'll try to and look some of the past episodes over the past few months. I've done a few very beginning to end where I just start at the very beginning and go all the way to the end on a typical corn or grain mash. So try to tune in some of those old ones and check us out every Saturday and Wednesday at 8. Thanks for dropping in, bro. And I know he said that. Well, that's not too much ago. That's 15 minutes. He's probably gone by now, though. Yeah. Yeah, maybe try moving it a little closer to the heat. Yeah, I wouldn't never run inside on open heat. Mine's on a glass top. I've got a glass top stove, and I don't recommend using stoves because most stoves cycle on and off, on and off, which is horrible for moonshine. You don't want that. But this particular model, it's the infrared type, and once I get above 8, it doesn't cycle off. Once I get it on high, it stays on high, and I can put all my burn. It's got like 5 burners. It's an old one. It's probably 15, 12, 15 years old. But my 18 and a half covers about 3 burners. The middle warmer and the front back. The front one's like 3,200 watt. The back one's 22. No, I think the front one might be 36. It's a high watt, and then the back one's like 2,200 watts, and then the warmer is just a warmer. But I turn the front one and the back one on high, and it stays on solid. And then when I get it running, I cut it back a little bit, but they stay constantly on. So if you got a stove that can do that, it's fine. But otherwise, or if you're using elements, in it, like a water heating type elements. Those work fine inside. But yeah, I wouldn't recommend running turkey fryers and burning and doing all that inside, which is what I think Marky the Phil is doing using propane. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Look how many DeLoreans out there with rust on them. Barrel heaters definitely better than fish tank heaters, 100%. I'm just trying to get caught up real quick here. I'm just reading, looking for questions. All right, he got a question. Hey all, I'm just getting my stuff ready to aged proof to 120 vanilla bean and oak for the honey rum and vanilla bean and toasted. Awesome. That's great, brother. Have you toasted and charred your wood or welcome to the show, brother? We just sitting talking to some beginners and intermediates about making moonshine and different distillates, making wines, and cooking up mash. Another question here. I'm trying to build a cake still set up. Can't find anyone willing to TIG weld my fittings, so I'm going to silver solder them in. Hopefully that'll work. It should. It should work. The pressures that we work under in the distilling are negligible. 3 to 5 psi. Somewhere in that range, depending on the temperature, whether you got thunder, how many in line, all that shit. So worrying about pressure building up, blowing them up, issue. Now, are you wanting for you wanted to? I mean, you've got a fitting on the top of the keg ready to go, so you don't have to do it. But are you using elements, Nick, or using the water heater elements? You want ferrules welded into the side, or you want to clean out on the top, or I can't believe you can't find somebody to do it for you. I know where are you located. Yeah, we can find somebody. You and the Moonshine Militia just put your name out there and find out. Ask people, tell them your problem, and say, you'll find somebody close by that'll. I mean, they'll probably charge you, a coin to do it, but they'll do it for you. Aging it, right, right. Well, at 60 proof, you'll tend to pull more of the sweetness out of the wood than a lot of the vanilla notes. If you're looking for more vanilla notes, you probably want to go in at higher proof. You'll pull the sweetness of the caramel notes off at a lower proof. Here's a little chart I found not too long ago. Um, this is with the char levels though, and so if you're charring your wood and toasting it, this is for toast. This is the toasting chart, and this is what temperature and how long. And then after that, you'll want to also put a char on it, depending on the char that you want. I thought that was pretty cool. New little chart I put up recently. Yeah, you'll get more if you go at a higher proof. You'll get more spice, vanilla, and tannin and oak from, from the wood because you'll get a deeper penetration into the wood. Whereas at a lower proof, you'll get some of the sweetness and the caramels and some of those from the woods, but you won't get a lot of the spice and other characteristics of the wood. and so that's like 130 to maybe 100 range. The differences. I'm not sure 60 what it would pull out, but with chips and staves, I'd stick with the staves. Chips tend to over tannin things. They're really quick, and as a result, basically you're getting a lot of color, but you're getting mostly tannins and a lot of bitterness, and you're not getting a good char. So I like staves a little better than I do the chips. But nothing replaces a good barrel in time. Well, we know that. But yeah, I'd stick with the staves and char all sides of it, toast and char all sides. All right, I'm gonna scroll on down. Okay, the wood cherry chips are toasting. And I just toasted the oak staves. Didn't recharge them, but I figured you really don't need it with the toasted chip. Yeah, okay, sounds good, brother. Especially the cherry. I like the cherry. It's good stuff. I know what Wayne does a lot of work with cherry, and that's pretty good. Pretty good stuff. Heater elements. You want a 6 inch on the top. North Carolina, we can find somebody that can do it for you, brother, for sure. That copper cap is expensive. I tell you what, you might be able to take that copper cap and take it to somebody and say, "I'll give you this 6 inch copper cap if you weld a 6 inch stainless to the top of this," and you probably get it in exchange because it won't help a lot, having that copper there. Like that. If you're going to have a copper column, it would. But 6 inches, basically, are you just going to do it on the main top and take out the whole ferrule and all? I guess then you're going to need like a reducer, to go from 6 to 2 or whatever size you, 2 or 3 or 4, whatever size that you end up going to. 4 is generally a pretty good, size that I can get my arm in. I can't get my arm in a 3, um, but a 4 inch I can squeeze it in there and get it in there. Um, if you got big arms, you might have to have a 6. But yeah, if join are you on the militia page, Nick? Are you in the Moonshine Militia group? Just just post in there. There's a lot of people in North Carolina. We got a lot of people in there that they'll help you out. Yeah, just say I'm new. I'm working on my steel. I got a 6 inch, and you want to put some elements on the side, I guess too. So you're going to put some twos on the side. Just say looking for somebody that can help me weld. I'm willing to pay. I just want somebody to weld, do a decent job, and do it. If you're close to me, hell, I'd break out my little TIG welder and do it. But um, didn't cost you anything. I tell you what, you could probably take that 6 inch ferrule. It's a ferrule. You could probably trade that for the job itself because them ain't cheap. They'd probably put a weld a stainless 4 and maybe a 2. Hell, Fuel probably do it for it. He's in Ohio. Yeah, just asking the militia page. Say, I've on this and on the group thing, and I've got a keg steel. I want to get a ferrule welded to, and I've got a 6 inch copper. I was going to weld to it, but if it'd be better to, that's crazy. It's insane. Like, what the hell? Why would they turn it down? Like, they're afraid they're going to be brought into some conspiracy or something, manufactured. It's just crazy. Where you find you somebody, yeah, jump in there and ask where Tom from, or there's a lot of people down in West Tennessee or East Tennessee and West North Carolina and that area, Maggie, all in that area. Hell, yeah, he's probably too busy with the show. But yeah, there's we can get it taken care of, man. Just ask in the militia page and tell them what you need, and just take that 6-inch copper ferrule, and they would, in exchange for that, they'd probably put a 4 on the top, a couple of 2s in the side if you want to use elements in exchange for that. Those ain't cheap, and they would do it for a bigger steel or something a lot bigger. I figured people don't have any sense, but I will say North Carolina, is different than most states. We've had several members. I will say be careful. Be careful in North Carolina because they're strict on that shit down there, man. They don't fuck around in North Carolina. They got the ABC there that has nothing better to do than enforce alcohol. That's what they're there for, and they have nothing else to do. They're the alcohol police. And we've had 4 members in the last, this past year, got caught, and some of it was from what they were posting. Some of it was from being ratted out. You know, so but I don't think asking that question is going to be a big issue. Just, I'd probably hold off if I was in North Carolina posting videos of me actively running my steel. I don't recommend anybody doing that at this point in time. I did it at one point in time. I was crazy and didn't really give a damn. But after seeing people, get busted and stuff, it kind of some people do care. You think with all the shit going on in the world, they'd have a lot better things to worry about. Well, some people do, and some cops don't. I mean, they like I say, they got an ABC and they got ALE there, the alcohol law enforcement. That's all they got to do. That's their whole job is to do that. So, it's like the state level ATF. They got nothing better to do. But asking on this page, it's cool, and yeah, it shouldn't be hard to find somebody to do it. Yeah, I figured the hardest part be, you know, working a deal. No, I won't do it for 2 jars, 1 jar. That would, yeah. Well, I mean, the laws are pretty much the same as everybody else's. It's the damn enforcement. A lot of states really, unless you put it in their face and you're selling it and you're just obvious, and you don't care, and you're beating your neighbors and beating your dog out drunk and making people mad or doing something crazy, to get attention drawn to you. They don't bother with that. North Carolina, man, they don't fool around. That's the way it is, Brian. In some states, it's kind of like in the United States, it's like marijuana. Federally, it's still illegal, so is marijuana. But at the same time, you can go to a grocery store in Ohio and buy recreational, or you can, well, no, I should say Ohio, but in some places you can just go into the store and buy recreational, you know, weed without, anything other than just showing your license to prove that you're old enough, and they just jot down, I guess there's limits on how much you can get in some states. But it's still federally illegal. And so some states like Missouri, you're allowed to do 100 gallons per year per person, up to 2 people in a household that are over 21 and that can legally, drink, buy, still alcohol. But you can't sell it. You got to keep it in your home There is an exception that you can take some to like a party or something like that, but you have to get a permit if you're going to take it out of the home for a party. But still, you can't sell it. So yeah, it's just different. You know, in different states, it's different. I think West Virginia decided they were going to make it legal, and I think they did like a gallon a year, and everybody's like, "Really, a gallon?" It's like, one run, and I'm illegal. I'd have to have a 2 gallon still or a tiny still. So I think they're revisiting and going to up that maybe to something else. Maybe it's 5 gallons. I'm being kind of facetious with a gallon, but it was a ridiculously low amount. So they're revisiting it. I know Alaska's got okay, probably Missouri, one of the most lax states. I know Tennessee or Texas um, was trying to fight it and make it federally legal and legal in the whole state of Texas. And I'm not sure what kind of happened with that case. I do know that there are some protections if you're like in the Home Distillers Association or something like that. You might get a little extra level of protection in some states um, that have brought lawsuits forward, but you'd have to consult an attorney and do some deep diving on that. Don't take anybody's word for it on the internet. Yeah, well, I mean, up in North Carolina, they got alcohol law enforcement, ALE, and that's all they do. That's their job is to enforce alcohol laws, and they go and make sure all the liquor stores are doing it right, not selling to young kids, and look for bootleggers, and the moonshiner. That's their whole job, their whole purpose. Yeah, most states will allow beer and wine. Kentucky allows beer and wine, maybe even more than the 200 gallons before you have to get a license and all that. You can sell, but you have to declare it. You have to pay taxes on it. You have to declare a hobby income. They're trying to get it legal. It's and they're trying to get it legal everywhere. Yep, home distilling 100% illegal, except in certain states where it's legal by the state's laws, but federally illegal. So unless you're really doing something like in Missouri, for example, unless you're selling outside the home or contributing to the delinquency of minors in your home, you got a bunch of young people coming in, get drunk, leaving, you know, as long as you're not doing either one of those, that federal shouldn't be getting involved, period, anyway. So they would have to suspect you of something other than that to come into your home to find that, right? Because that's something that's legal in that state. So they just can't override, and come in and like gangbusters without probable cause, and they would have no idea of what you're doing in the confines of your own home, unless there was something extraneous that they were getting, some information from. So, it's just I think eventually it will. I think eventually, to me, it's part of my life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. It's a pursuit of happiness. I will say that alcohol was the first tax ever imposed on people in the United States. Right after we beat the British for unjust taxes, what did George Washington do? He was a distiller, but yet he imposed a liquor tax on all the liquor. And that might have something to do with him distilling it himself and want to cut out a lot of the bootleggers, and increase his business. So yeah, he had a political edge. Politicians were corrupted too, even our forefathers and founding fathers, even George. So there was more to going on than that, and that started the Whiskey Rebellion, but that was the first tax that we ever had imposed on us, and And now they say it's for safety reasons. Bullshit. It's all about the Benjamins. Yeah, we did the whiskey rebellion. That lasted about a day. Yeah, it didn't last very long. Clint, I tell you, I've talked to a lot of different people in a lot of different states. Federally, it's pretty much set, but states, man, it's unbelievable. Some states, it's like $500 to $1,000 just to get going, and some states, it's 15, 20,000 plus to get going, and that's just on small scale stuff. It's crazy. It's so much different. Just looking at all the different states, you think all the states would have pretty much the same rules and regulations? No, I mean they're crazy. In some states, you can be a legal distiller, and everything you distill, you have to sell to the Alcohol Beverage Commission (ABC), and they buy it from you. They tell you how much you can charge for it. They buy it from you. You warehouse it yourself, and as it gets sold, you distribute it. And if you want some for yourself, you have to buy it back. So it's really weird how some states work like that, and then other states, it's wide open. You just sell to a distributor, and they distribute, and that's how that works. Or it's very different, and every state is very, very different. That's why you have to really do the research yourself, and or get an attorney. There's attorneys that practice just inland in every state. That's what they do. And or their specialty or one of their specialties is dealing with all this and getting through the legal hurdles. I know about some buddies that did the grassroots thing, that did it from ground up, and basically they treated them like shit and made them jump through a bunch of hoops. Every time they come in, it'd be something else, another fee, another fine, or another extended time, or and it just kept going and going. It's almost like they were trying to discourage him from doing it, making him jump through all these hoops. And I know one that finally, his landlord, the person who leased the building from, is like, damn, like, the deal they worked out, I guess, was, once he got into business, started flowing, then he'd start paying the rent, and the dude was cool, and the landlord's awesome, and they had that kind of deal worked out. And finally, the landlord's like, shit, let me get involved, and he knew some representatives, and make a few phone calls. Next day, boom, you're ready, good to go. That's bullshit. That bothers me that somebody has to go to those. That's just how our fucking government works. There's too much corruption, and people, their paychecks aren't enough. They got to try to scam and fuck somebody. Yeah, yeah. I wasn't aware how Alabama did it. So I guess if you make, how do you get it sold nationally to distributors? Like if you want to, the state stores distribute it, or how would that work? I guess if you can't go national, I don't know. How does that work? But yeah, it's very, very weird. It's strange how many states, how much control they take over business. It's like, man, this is definitely government overreach. You know, oh yeah, Canada's bad, brother. I know, man. I try my best not to get into politics on here because what's going on in the world, it gets a lot more fire in my belly than moonshine ever did. Hey Tammy, how you doing over there in Garrett County? Hope everybody's doing all right this evening. Hope you have a good weekend. But yeah, I try not to talk about religion and politics on here, but we got problems. We got problems that got to be solved before they become bigger problems, and probably maybe you can tune in on Friday. We can talk about that on the shit show. Or I was thinking about maybe doing a podcast about politics and all this, but I was afraid a lot of people watching get mad at me because there's some people that everybody's got an opinion on it. Not, they look at your opinion. It might differ from some other people, and they might get mad and never watch my stream again. And I don't want to get anybody mad. There's enough people out there talking about politics and stuff, and but it is pretty discouraging to see what's going on. Oh yeah. Well, I mean, here's a perfect example. This past week, a lady got put in prison in England for speech, for just normal speech, not running in saying the theater's on fire, or I'm gonna kill you, or I'm gonna blow up the White House like Madonna said. Nothing like that. It was something simple, and it was an opinion, and I think it had to do with a certain religion of immigrants coming into their country, and they're afraid that it's not because of their fear of being ostracized at home, but it's basically a takeover. So she voiced her opinion on that matter, and now going to jail for free speech on Facebook. She said it on Facebook or TikTok or somewhere, and now she's going to jail for it. What's going on, Brian? Brother Brian preaching it. I saw it, folks. He was on the phone at his jar shine. Hope you didn't have to, brother. You can get other state distributors too from your state, but some states you can sell directly to. So through, yeah, you definitely have to do a lot, or talk to somebody. Talk to somebody that's got a small craft distillery, and most will open up with you, especially if you tell them that you're in a different town or something. So don't go to don't go to somebody in the same town you are. Go across state, the other end of the state or something. Say, oh, I'm from over here. I'm gonna open up a little craft distillery, long, long way from you. I'm just want to get some advice. They're a lot more likely to give you advice than somebody local. But I will say, be careful about if you do make shine and you do sell shine and illegally. Don't talk about that to other moonshiners in your area, because a lot of them will see it as you taking food off their table, and they'll turn your ass in, just straight up. So be very careful about sharing that. Here on here we're all brothers. We don't care as much, but yeah, some places, even with some of the people online, well, be careful to talk about selling, because some of them will turn you in. I don't I don't think that's what's happening in North Carolina, but I don't know. Never sell, never tell. That's right. Never sold an ounce in my life. I sold a lot of gallons though. See, there's ways to tell the truth. I never sold an ounce. Never sold an ounce of shine in my life. That's just that much. I ain't never sold that little. See, I didn't lie though, did I? So there's ways that you can say things and not be lying. I say you learn how to talk to women without lying. Hell no. Yeah, it's yeah. Be careful. They are watching, as if they don't have anything better to do these days. But again, as long as you're just doing it as a hobby, if you're not selling it, you're not out there telling everybody in the community you're doing it, not sharing it with the deputy's wife, just be discreet. Oh, absolutely, Clint. I mean, that was the biggest thing back in the day. You didn't have to worry about just regular people. I think Tammy, I'll, I'll take care of that when I can get back on here. I don't see it right now, Tammy, but I will look for it later. But yeah, back in the day, shiners were the one of the ones you really had to worry about the most. I mean, they'll turn you in quicker than a pasture will. But I remember I grew up in a dry county. That's why it stayed wet for so long. It was dry through most of my early childhood. So I was, about turned 21 by the time it turned wet. Uh, but yeah, we got our bikes to the bootleggers. We didn't make any. We made shine as a kid. Grew a little weed, and we'd get on our bikes, drive to the bootleggers and buy liquor. But every 4 years, they'd try to vote it and vote it in, and the bootleggers and moonshiners and the pastors would all get together, arm in arm, and preach against it. And they kept it dry there for a long, long, long time. Prohibition all the way up to probably um, early to mid '80s. Yeah, I'm in it for the hobby. I enjoy doing it. It's enjoyable. Used to I did it to share with my buddies and have a good time, party with, and you know I I bartered a little bit with it. I might trade a jar for some weed or something like that back in the day and things like that. Whatever I needed. Uh, Probably sold a little bit too. Statute of limitation ran out on that a long time ago. But yeah, I just enjoy the hobby. I like to make wine a lot. I'm doing a lot of wines and stuff, and I wish that one guy had stuck around. I could have helped him. But I do a lot of wines and brandies now. I did grains for ages. But I'm going to have to do some grains this summer, so I got a couple 15-gallon barrels I want to fill up and start aging. And after I get those full, you know, I'll slow down on the grains and just sit and sip on those until one gets ran out. And I'll fill it up and start sipping on the other. Absolutely. Brian, I started a Facebook group called the Moonshine Mafia. And it was before the show ever came about. And it was just for me and my buddies back home. And I don't remember if a lot of you remember back in the day when Facebook started, there was some games, Zynga games like Farmville and all these different games. One of them was Mafia Wars. So I enjoyed playing that game a lot. And most of my friends back home, they like playing it too. So I started the Moonshine Mafia so we could all get together and play that game. And it was a bunch of buddies that I shined with when I was younger. And, that's why we named it that. And that drank a lot of shine growing up and stuff. And that probably it was the first group, our moonshine group on Facebook. And that's probably 15, close to 15 years ago, before the show ever started. Nobody talked about it much. I grew up in Eastern Kentucky where it was an occupation. It was something that was fairly common, especially up until they went dry wet. When it was dry, there was a lot of moonshine, and you'd have to drive quite a ways to buy legal liquor, or you could go to the bootleggers and pay a premium, and you can get moonshine, early times, Schlitz beer, whatever you wanted to at the bootleggers. You get um, whatever you want to get. Moonshine, a lot of people bought moonshine. They liked the moonshine. It was usually a higher proof, and they could take it home and water it down a little bit, make it stretch it out, a little further than they could have, early times. And it was just, a bit of alcohol, for that sort too. Yeah, that's fact. Yeah, yeah. That's a fact. Yeah, I enjoy drinking my own. Yeah, it is. But it takes time, Brian. It takes time and effort, and to make a bourbon as good at the store. You're going to have a barrel, and you're going to have some time on the wood, the chips, the staves. They'll get you there, not quite to like a fine bourbon, like a Weller or something like that that I like to drink. Really, good stuff. But it takes time and patience, and for a lot of people, just go out and spend 30, $40 and just get it and bring it home, and instead of waiting for a year or two or three or four or nine, it's they just don't have the patience for it. They just got better things. Not everybody likes the hobbies. I, I understand. Everybody likes to do different things. Some guys like to knit and crochet. whatever, whatever floats your boat, Rosie. Yeah. What was that guy's name? I should make fun of him. He was a big football player, badass dude. Rosie Greer or somebody. That was his name. Big guy. Man, he loved the fucking knit and crochet. People made fun of him up there, he beat your ass. He was big, big dude, like a tackle. I can't remember what his name. Let me look that up. That's brought back some good memory. What did I say his last name was? God damn it, I've forgotten it already. Rosie Greer. Rosie Greer, football player. Yeah, big dude. Yeah, that's him. That's an old memory. Yeah, he'd like to crochet and knit. People made fun of him. If they get into his face. The Danny Outlaw Just Go Wild. That's probably some comedy. I'm not remembering, but yeah, yeah. Everybody's got their hobby. Well, I enjoy it. And I think people should be able to make their own as long as they can do it safely. You know, you know. I think the government's full of shit when they say it's all about safety because bullshit. If it was about safety, they'd say, okay, you have to have this class, and you have to pay a fee for this class. You have to take this federally sanctioned class, change, and every year you might have to take a brush up course for continuing education on safety and pay a fee, 'cause it's all about the money. It's not about safety. It's like a lot of people think they reduced the speed limit on our interstates to 55 for safety. No, they did that for gas conservation back when the fuel crisis in the late 70s, early 80s had nothing to do with safety. Nothing. They don't care. Just go white. I'll have to look it up, man. Boone County. All right. American dancer and entertainer. Okay. Looks kind of like Elvis with his glasses there. The dancing outlaw. Okay. Boone County. Where? Carolinas or Kentucky? Where? Boone County. Who? All right. All right. Let's see here. All right. Let's see. In it. All right, let me. Oh hell, that's a whole hour long. I was gonna show the clip of it, but man, I can see over there. I can see her dancing. You got the plodding going on. Yeah, I'll definitely have to watch that. 1927, 1985. I'll definitely be watching this later on. Thanks for sharing it, brother. Yeah, that's what I was just looking at. Yeah, I'll have to watch it. Looks like a good one. The Dancing Outlaw. All right, some of you beginners still with us. It's been slow tonight, ain't it? For Saturday night. Then we ain't got a whole lot of viewers tonight. I guess we bored them to death talking about all this shit and not staying on topic, I guess. Not a bored them out. No, we're not going to get much out of them tonight. Yeah, it's real hard, Clint. Brother. Have you ever thought about getting back into it, or you just done with it, don't need to, and happily retired? Uh-oh. Emma Curtis. I can't wait to watch it now. It looked pretty good. I mean, I'm from Eastern Kentucky where, clogging and dancing like that's, that's a pretty common way of dancing. I've got my first cousin and her husband won, medals and stuff doing the clogging and dancing. But, trying to think of the name of that one family that one YouTuber kind of exploited. They were the inbred Whitakers. The inbred Whitakers. I don't know if it was West Virginia or Virginia or somewhere like that. He went and he did several, uh, I guess YouTube videos and specials on the family and stuff, and of course a lot of people love to look at people like that, and muse and admire and make jokes and point at, and some people are sad to see it, and other people this day and time, hell, people don't care. They laughing their ass off at them, and it's I can see both sides, but people going in there and exploiting him like that, and I guess that over time the guy started developing a little bit of guilt about what he was doing, so he did more trying to help them there towards the end than just go in and film them for exploitation. But yeah, at the end there, I'm pretty sure he started feeling guilty and started sharing the money, and I think people did a GoFundMe for him or something like that. If y'all haven't seen that, it's pretty sad. No, sir, it ain't. How old are you? You can't be older than me. I'm old as dirt, but I know what you mean. Yeah, man, I grew up in it, man. It's I look at pictures of my childhood and of the houses at the hollows and where I lived, and it looked like a lot of places 50, 70 years prior to that. It's kind of behind the times, kind of a sheltered life. A lot of music didn't get there till years later, like heavy metal and stuff. It took forever. We'd have to go to the top of the mountains to the coal mines on the top of the ridges and stuff and party up there with AM radios just to bring in those distant stations that play some of that heavy metal and hard rock. All we had to listen to was gospel and country mostly. Not that that was bad, but I'm a rocker. Where'd you come from, Brian? Yeah, yeah. I grew up in Eastern Kentucky, right in the middle of where all the hillbillies came to moonshine. There's a pretty good video somebody posted earlier about alcohol and the progression of alcohol in the United States, and talked about the Whiskey Rebellion and George Washington and all that. Cool, cool. Yeah, it's you look up some of the hollers back when I was growing up, and even still today. I mean, there's shanties and shacks and stuff. You swear is hard wind blow over, man. They've been there 60, 80 years. Some close more than that. Yeah, I remember we didn't grow up real poor. We were, I guess, middle class for that area, but I go stay with my friends and visit with my friends and stuff, and there was a lot of poor. There was a lot of poor there. But we had black and white TV. We didn't have color TV for a long time. I don't think we had a remote control before I left the home. But yeah, we had black and white TV for a long, long time. Listen to the radio and watch the TV. We had 3 or 4 stations. That's all we get. Yeah, me too, Clint. I'm in the 60s too, buddy. Yeah, me too. I didn't break horses. I broke my back. I did construction, a lot of construction work before I went back to. I went to college after that. I got out and decided I was going to go pre-med and went to college, and the math stumbled me, and I dropped out, and then got into construction and did construction work, photography work. What all did I do? Worked at some custom labs, processing and developing. Worked as a lineman for a cable company. I mean, I did a lot of different jobs. I had worked for builders and building houses, helped wire and plumb houses. Did a lot of that. Went out on my own, had my own little construction company, and just got tired of working my ass off, and went back to school and took some science and stuff, and ended up deciding to go business. So I got a Bachelor of Science degree in business, which I guess a lot of that's a degree that a lot of maybe hospital administrators or that type get. But I'd already had some of that science, background from my pre-med, that I just wanted to finish the science route out because it was cheaper, and then I just tacked on a bunch of business classes to that to make it a Bachelor of Science BBS. Um, but yeah, and then I got into real estate appraising. After working construction, seeing the appraisers come in there and spend 30 minutes, 15 minutes, 30 minutes, and what's he doing? He's an appraiser, and coming into khakis, drawing floor plans, doing all that. And I'm like, well, how much he making? He's like, man, he'll probably make $200 or $300 on today on that appraisal. And I was like, damn, I was making that in a week. I'm like, shit, maybe I should do that and use my background in building and all that as to help. And so I decided to go back to school and finish up, and got some real estate classes, some business classes, and went into real estate. probably should have just stuck with building houses. That there's not a lot of money in appraising, and unless you want to open up a big firm and employ a bunch of people, which I did not want to do. So I just was a one-man show, did all the stuff, micromanaged it, which is probably the wrong way to go about it as well. But it's something I enjoyed doing, and I managed to, carve out a decent little living doing it. It was easy work for me. I was, knowledgeable about all the building components and costs and all that stuff. So it was easy, and so I just got into that and did that for about 35 years and just retired a few years ago. Yeah, that's awesome, Brian. Yeah, I I did a lot of work when I was a kid. Hell, we mowed grass and shoveled snow and raked leaves and delivered newspapers. And I was always, working to make money. My dad, had a little bit of money, but he wouldn't give me shit unless I worked for it. I resented the hell out of it then, because I had a lot of friends that had wealthy parents. They just showered them with money and gave them all they wanted. And then, of course, there's poor friends that had nothing. I was kind of in between. I'd ask my dad for some money to go on a date to go to the movies, and he'd give me a $5 bill. And I'm like, that won't get me in my date in the movies. I ain't gonna make her pay. There's no popcorn, nothing. Didn't know mow any grass this week, son. So I had to work. And that, he was doing me a favor. I look back on it now. I didn't think it that way then, but yeah. But yeah, I worked hard up until that point, and I was in my late 20s when I did that. So I'd already worked, quite a bit, doing a lot of different jobs. I worked at a couple banks too. When I first got out of school, I worked at a bank before I went to college, and did a lot of different things. They don't make any money. I tell you, those tellers, when you go to a bank, those bank tellers, man, that's a minimum wage job, man. And I hated it. I hated being inside like that. And then I worked construction. I enjoyed building. I should have stayed in building. I'd have made a lot more money being a contractor than I did at appraising. Yeah, I was too honest in appraising. The house wasn't worth it. I didn't put that. I didn't put it on there. The banks didn't like that shit. They can't make that loan and sell it if you do that. A lot of corruption and all that racket. That's why I was really glad to retire last year or this year. Yeah, yeah, I got some buddies that they're still doing it. Hell, Donnell Kent, maybe he retired last year, but he's my age. He worked for the highway department, road building. I got a lot of buddies still operating heavy equipment, making good money. Brian, if you can operate heavy equipment, you can make decent money. That's for sure. Hard work, but good pay. There's a lot of good jobs out there right now, man. Hell, I was, you know, compared to what I was making, for the schooling and everything and all the continuing education I did, I was way underpaid. I should have been making a lot more money for the work. I could have worked at a lot of different jobs and made a lot more money. I really regret. You do welding, you can make good money at that. Too bad you're not in North Carolina. You can help a buddy over there. Yeah. Yeah, I hate tax season too. All the business having to break everything down with the business and home office and all the expenses, and yeah, it's a pain in the ass. Yeah, my bull riding was dirt bikes and strip jobs, beat you to death, car wrecks, and football. Football about killed me. That's what gave I got nerve damage in my neck from it. And probably, they say every time your head hits something, it flattens your brain out a little. Man, mine must be pretty damn smooth because I did a lot of head knocking. Well, I won't tell him, Brian. I won't tell him. Anybody? Tig's easy. If you can control the heat and control the hardest part about tigging is knowing what to set the temperatures at, and getting your temp set right. But you can get some pretty good deals on TIG. I bought this little Yes welder. It's a Chinese inverter welder. It's got a pretty good little duty cycle on it. It can weld for a pretty good long time without overheating or anything. And it's got fans and alarm. But it's a square wave pulse TIG AC DC 250 amp. They're normally like 750. I got it on a Black Friday sale a couple of years ago for 440 or something like that. And the equivalent for a Miller or something like that is probably like 3,500, $4,000. Brian probably, he probably got a Lincoln or a Miller or some fancy, nice big one. But really, for home hobbying and welding, you know, small stuff and beer kegs, perfect for something like that. But I mean, 250 amp, and it's a pulse square wave. Didn't come with a pedal. I had to spend 40, 60 bucks on a pedal for it, but it came with pretty much the gun, everything you needed. Wasn't the best quality guns and everything. Yeah, but those little gas welders, seems to do great. I read up on them and read a lot of reviews and got on YouTube and saw what real snobby welders thought about it, and some of them cut it down, but at the end of the day they're like, well, they hated it, because they spent so much for theirs, but theirs is more of a duty rating. Theirs is something you can use all day. This is something that you can use a few minutes at a time, and you have to let it cool off and use it for a few more minutes, let it cool off. It's not something you can, you know, weld a skyscraper together or a bridge together with. But for home crafting and stuff like that, it's plenty. And it comes with a stick, so you can stick weld with it too. Yeah, Lincoln, and I've got a shit. What's the name? Let's go ahead and look at the damn thing. Hobart, a little Hobart MIG welder. I think it's Hobart 110 or something like that. It's fine for little stuff. I got that 15 years ago, a long time ago. But I picked that little Yes welder up, man. Those are awesome. Yeah, just use the melting metal. You don't have to have a stick, or filler. And that pulse, if if you've done a lot of pulse welding, Brian, I find it funny as shit. You know, if you want to get a lot of hits, yeah, this was an old Hobart MIG. It's a MIG, and it's decently welded, you know. But it was just 110. It wasn't big amps or nothing like that. It held a smaller wire, but it did a good job for what for what it was, just for small, small steel, But it did decent work. But Brian, have you done any of the pulse? It's funny to watch the people comment on it on Facebook and YouTube and stuff. You want to get a lot of comments, do some half-ass welding on a video, and man, you'll get 100,000 trolls. They'll slam you, and you'll get, you'll make probably $100 off that video because you'll get 100,000 hits of everybody, and they'll talk about it for months and months about what a horrible job. You should never do this. You'll get 1,000,000 people knocking you on that shoddy ass welding, man. But the pulse, it's interesting. This thing, I could take 2 beer cans and stack them together and just pulse that rim together, just the rim, not using stick or anything, just pulse, pulse, pulse. It made it look like little dimes holding 2 cans together, just like rim to rim, like this right here, and just go around and and weld that little aluminum. It's cool as shit, man. It can do some really fine stuff, and it just so whatever speed. Yeah. And you'd be surprised how many. Oh, that's not a structural weld. That'll never hold. And it's like, no, nor is it intended to. It's not. It's a different type of weld. There's lots of different types of welds. Not all of them are done for structural integrity. Yeah. And I guess it's different too. You push with TIG, and you tend to drag with your rods and with MIGs that are fluxed. So that's one of the biggest differences I had to get used to is instead of dragging, I was pushing. Damn, I'm gonna have to look at these love things a little more often here. What? Lady, I'm getting in trouble. Cherie Devane, Linda. Yeah, yeah, you gotta flex that puddle, man. Oh, I need a drink. I've been sitting there on that. I need a damn drink. Cheers. Yeah. Well, obviously in North Carolina, they need a few around there that don't give a shit what you bring into them. Weld a ferrule on a beer keg. Who gives a shit? Last time I checked, there are no laws against that. Nobody gives a shit. No cop's going to come in and say, "All right, we got you for the keg, but we want to know who welded that barrel on there." And he's going, nobody, no. You know, it's just why the fuck? It's stupid. That's right. Put mine a little whiskey though. That's good sour mash though. That's Weeded Buddy Butcher sour mash. It's pretty good, but I'd like to have a little bit more of that Weller I was just talking about. I drained that sucker. That's good stuff. Good shit right there. You drinking with us, Tammy? Got me a little fruit fly. God damn it. Y'all get fruit flies? All right, brother. You be careful on that way to bed. I hope it don't go in circles when you get there, man. What's going on, Jason? It's good to see you, brother. Later, Clint. Feel good, brother. I hope that bed don't go in circles. If it does, come back and see us. Gnats, yeah, fruit flies. All right. Tammy got her some shine. Oh, that's good. What's been going on, Jason? Yeah, if you get dizzy, man, get back up because you know what's going to happen when you lay down and you spin. You don't want to do that. You got to drink more. You got to drink them spins away. Hungarian oak. I was reading, believe it or not, I was reading something about that the other day. There was somebody asked a question about toasting and charring a barrel in the militia page, and that's where I found that chart that I put up a minute ago. Um, but this is just regular oak. Um, but there was a website that I was reading from that talked about different oaks. It was talking about, I don't know if it's Hungarian oak. They did talk about French oak, and the notes that maybe it was Hungarian oak. It was American oak, French oak, and then some other oak. So maybe it might have been. Um, but I was surprised to see that there was a lot of difference in flavors between a French oak and an American oak. And then I didn't really commit a lot of what I was reading to memory because I was just looking basically for temperatures and times for toasting and and then charring. But I did come across. Let me see if I made it. Let me see if I saved that page. It'll be here at the bottom of my list. See if I did. So I did save some interesting. No, no, it'll be right there. Fuck. Nope, I didn't. I didn't save it. But you should be able to come across it pretty easily. I'm not sure what I was googling char and char levels in toast levels in American oak, and it gave me a list of all three, and it talked about the flavors that all three brought. And I'm pretty sure the other one was Hungarian. I I I can't 100% guarantee, but I do know it was American French and some other oak, and I'm pretty sure that's what it was. Blueberry wine. We definitely know it's going to taste like blueberry then. Are you gonna put whiskey in it or a brandy or what? That'd be pretty damn good for a brandy or a grappa. Now your spelling's fine. You're spelling just fine, Tammy. Yeah, nothing like the old homemade stuff, that's for sure. But some of that store bought ain't bad. You know, it's a lot of people say, "Oh, it's not moonshine if it's store bought." But you know, there's a lot of people that use the same still that they did when they were making moonshine illegally. They go legal. They use the same ingredients and the same still. And the only difference is they're paying tax on it, and then all of a sudden people say it's not as good. Now I know Sugarland, some of those ain't all that good to begin with, but that is kind of odd. And there's some of those small craft distillers that make pretty good White Dog and 1 and 2 year old whiskeys. You know, we got old corn liquor. It's Russell's Reserve. That's some good stuff right there. Bourbon or a rye. It'll be interesting. You know, that you're not going to get as much of that long term, you know, blueberry carry, but you'll definitely have some notes, good notes. It'd be damn good with a brandy too, for sure. But blueberry wine, man, does he make brandy or did you say wine or did you say blueberry wine? Yeah, that's good stuff. See, that's you know, about 10, 12 years ago, I started getting more into wine making and doing brandies and stuff. I did grains for a long, long, long time. And I just never did a lot of brandies because it was expensive and I never really had interest in wine. I never was a big wine person. But as I got older, you know, hard liquor was harder and harder on me and I started appreciating the flavors of wine, you know, and so I was like, well, hell, I'm gonna learn to make a little wine and make a little brandy, and I started making wines, made some cherry wines and some blackberry and blueberry wines and some plum wines and grape wines and a lot of different types of wine, peach wine, watermelon wine. There's a lot of different wines, and you know when one didn't turn out very good or something like that, I just go ahead and distill it. You know, make a brandy out of it. I didn't want to waste the alcohol, but I started getting more interested in the wines because it had so much flavor. You know, I can distill a brandy and barely tell what it was when it started unless I infuse. And sometimes you can't even hardly tell. Some people say, "Oh, what did you make this with? Blueberry?" Yeah, I can taste the blueberry, but if you didn't tell them that, they wouldn't come up with blueberry. So I started drinking a lot of the wine, saying, I guess if you want the flavor, some of the best doing it this way. And then I did some fortified wines, where I'd make a brandy and mix it with wine and fortify it, make a really real strong wine and add some sweetness to it. And that was pretty good too. I made some good sherries and ports that way and some pretty good stuff that way. And that was a lot of fun. I made some damn good grappa, some of the best grappa. People loving it. Some people saying that's the best, and people that drink a lot. Like Ian, Philbilly's brother from another mother, and other people saying that's some of the best shit they've ever drank in their life. And these people have drank it and done about it all. That was a pretty big compliment. They wasn't saying that to blow smoke up my ass either. They were serious. And I've got a little bit of it left, but not much. And it was real good. But it took like 2 years to make it. You'd have to make the wine, and it was a white wine, and I aged it for about a year and a half, and then distilled it and put it in a jar, and for another 6-8 months, and so it was a little over 2 years into making it. Man, it's so smooth at 130 proof. It's just so smooth and so much flavor. It's definitely really good. Yeah, I want to try some French oak too. Something interesting in it. Phoebe and I talked about years ago was chestnut. A lot of wine. I use chestnut in my wine making because a lot of the oak and stuff kind of have reactions to red oak. We talked about that the other night, and I don't know, allergic reactions or just to the tannins or just a reaction, whether it's allergic or not. And but with some of my wines, I use a chestnut that doesn't bother me. And so I did some research on it, and chestnut's what most of the yo ho ho and a bottle of rum, and all the rum barrels back in the pirate days, and a lot of that was put in chestnut barrels. That was one of the main barrel woods that they used back in the old days before the chestnut blight. And just like that, Donald Chestnut, illegal in Pennsylvania. What are we talking about? Making shine? Yeah. Yeah, it's a lot of states it's illegal in. There's some states that permit it. Yeah, it does. But home distilling, as long as you're not selling it, a lot of people they don't, it's kind of a not a big deal. It's a small misdemeanor. In some states it's legal, kind of like marijuana. We were talking about that earlier. Kind of like marijuana, federally illegal, but a lot of states have legalized it where you can just steal so much in home, and as long as you're not selling it, consuming it in home, then it's legal. And I think it should be that way everywhere. As long as you're not selling it, you're not tax evading. As long as you're not, you know, out giving it away and preventing others from making money and getting tax from it, and doing it in your own home, why not? Yeah, we were talking about that, Brian, in the Moonshine Militia channel. That the guy that was asking about charring and toasting. We were talking about you can toast in your oven, at so many degrees for so many hours, and then char. Somebody said you had to use a torch, and somebody said they used up a whole bottle of you know propane torching some oak and torching a bunch of wood and stuff. And I'm like, you don't have to do that. You can build you a good little fire and uh, and just toast it over. Get you some firewood and toast it over a fire, and it won't cost you that much money just in firewood. Go out and scrape up a bunch. I want to hear about it, brother. That's awesome. Now, Jason, have you ever done like a run, and instead of when you want to do like several runs, a lot of people will run it, they'll get it out, they'll proof it down with water, right? And then they'll distill it again, get it out, proof it down with water, distill it again, right? Because you don't want to run, above 40% or 80 proof, right? Isn't that how most people do it? Try it this way. Try running it. Instead of proofing it down, pour it back into your back set. Run it again. Take out your fours and heads. What they're going to be a lot less. Use your smell. Don't go by volume. Run it again and keep putting it in that back set instead of diluting your flavor with water each run. Keep putting it back in that back set and run it again. I've been doing that for a long time, and I found out, well, a few years ago, talking to Alan Bishop, that's how they do cognac. That's how they get so much flavor, layered in a cognac like that. and it works pretty well. And that is how I did my grappa, and a few of my other distillates. And it's I think it's a lot better to do it that way than just to proof it down with water, because you lose so much flavor every time you proof it down with water and then redistill it. You've just watered down half the flavor, right? And then you distill it, you lose more flavor. Water it down, lose more flavor. Redistill it, lose even. I mean, if you're looking for a neutral, probably the way to go for sure. But next time, try saving that back set and using it to proof it down with, and just rerunning it with all those flavors still in there. It definitely works. It layers those flavors. It's good. It makes it smoother, and you maintain that flavor a lot better. That's the only way I'll do, triple runs anymore. I'll never go back to, proofing it down with water and then rerunning it like I was doing. Try it sometime. Greek ouzo. I used to drink some ouzo. I'm not real big on licorice and anise and all that, kind of stuff. I had an ex that liked ouzo, and so I drank a little bit with her, and it just, she didn't drink a whole lot. She just liked it because of that flavor, and I wasn't big, star anise flavor kind of guy. But I drank a little bit of it with her. But not a lot, not a lot of people. It's kind of one of those lost liquors, kind of like an absinthe, that just don't really hear a lot about. I'd say, I'm sure Alan Bishop's done some ouzos. I know he does a lot of absinthe and stuff like that, but I've never had much interest in it because of that, that anise and like a licorice, type flavor. What's going on, Scott? Good to see you, brother. I'm glad you made it. Better late than never, brother. I've been looking at on Facebook. It tells you the statistics on watchers. When they come into the show, how long they stay, and when they're viewing. I probably get about 7 or 8% of my viewers watch this live, and probably 90% plus watch it some other time, other than live. And it's a Q&A. I guess they get a lot of their questions answered. They don't have to ask it. And I guess a lot of people are scared to ask a lot of questions because they don't want their name out there. So they just listen, and watch the videos, and then watch some of the old ones and binge watch them and stuff, and get their answers out of it. And it's, yeah. And then you got people like Jeff that just sit there and lurk, that don't talk and chime in. What's going on, Jeff? Yeah. Well, save that back set, and on the final run, just run it all in back set. Just dump all your alcohol into a good concentrated back set, and run it all again through that, and it'll keep those flavors. Don't proof it down with water anymore. Just use back set or more mash. That's awesome, man. Yeah, I tell you what, I'm starting to drink a lot more wine. I like a lot of wine. That's right. There you go. That's kind of what that wine I was talking about a minute ago, that I made the wine and added some shine to and fortified it, and that's kind of what it reminded me of, was a real strong Mad Dog. It wasn't bad, man. It was. I like it. I've got stacks of wine in there, man, because it's legal. I've got bottles upon bottles upon bottles in there. I could show you my laundry room. Hell, I got stacks of wine bottles, man. full of wine. Boone's Farm, Mad Dog. Yeah, I make some pretty good. There's CB. All the rowdy friends are coming out late. Yeah, I make some pretty good wine. I mean, you'd be shocked. But about 10 years ago, when I first started, about 10 or 12 years ago, when I first started, my first wine was from a recipe that talked about Welch's grape juice, and it was a Welch's grape juice wine, and I kind of added some grapes to it, my own, because I was skeptical about doing just grape juice, booze pop. There you go. So I added I added maybe half fresh grapes, and then half of the juice came from, just Welch's juice, 100% juice. And I was really surprised at my very first wine, my first wine ever. And it definitely wasn't like my first shine. My first shine was shit. I'll just straight up tell you, I scorched the shit out of it cooking it and burnt my throat drinking it. But by God, it was the best damn thing ever. And I was proud as fuck when I was a kid. But my first wine, man, it was like, I can't believe I just made this. It was unbelievably good, and I drank a little bit of wine, and it was a good, dark wine. Aged. It takes a long time. You have to be patient because to get a good wine. Now the wine when it first comes out, you can taste ethanol. You can taste the wine and the ethanol are kind of separate. Um, Before it matures and ages, right? And people are like, that's kind of alcohol-y. I can taste the alcohol, and you can taste the ethanol. It's not blended and matured into the wine yet. It hadn't folded and matured into the wine. But after it sits for a year or so in a bottle, it doesn't taste that way anymore. Yeah, yeah, you have to find you some more or start growing you some. They'll grow like crazy, man. But you really, it's strange how these. I've read all about wine, man. 12 years ago when I got into it, man, I have to immerse myself into it, and I research, and learn everything I can about it, And I started reading about how some of these vineyards they do with their grapes, and they grow it in bad soil intentionally. They want to stress the grapes, right? So they don't want the perfect soil. That doesn't make a good wine grape. It makes okay table grapes, but for a wine grape, they want it stressed. And if the vine's producing heavy, they'll go in and cut a bunch off because they don't want it producing heavy either. They want to stress it that way. And so they want, kind of a off soil and try to stress it as it's growing. They don't want it real big. I mean, it's totally different. You think that, that it's typical farming for fruit. You'd think they'd want the biggest, juiciest, best grapes, best soil. I was surprised that they actually don't, because the stress that they get from doing these things to the vines makes the grapes, I guess, have a better body or flavor, than maybe less sugar and juice and more substance and flavor. I mean, I probably somebody that runs a vineyard could explain more scientifically what phenols and polyphenols and all that, and flavonoids and all the chemistry of it, what's created by stressing it. But yeah, they don't want big ass juicy grapes. They want small, stressed, you know, wine grapes. So I guess they do them a little bit different. But I think muscadine, where it grows wild, I do know back when Columbus first discovered America and they started trading with Indians and stuff, they very soon discovered, of course, corn, but they discovered muscadine grapes, right? And at the time, of course, you know, all the best wines were made in France and Italy and all this stuff. So these muscadines was something that they'd never seen or used before. So they started making wine with these muscadines and taking it back over there, and it was a hit. But just, you know, probably because it was something different, you know, that they haven't had, and it was kind of, you know, unique and hard to get, and you know how people are about that kind of thing. It was, you know, kind of exclusive, you know. So that added to the air of it, but they loved it. It became a huge hit, man. And muscadine wine at one time was one of the best wines in the world, you know. And all these Rothschilds and all these famous wine people, you know, back in the 14, 15, 1600s, man, and 1700s, man, muscadine was some of the finest wine ever. You know, I guess probably the 1600s, 1700s, probably the most popular. But yeah, they made that muscadine wine and took it back over to Europe, and it was a hit, man. It was everybody loved it, and it went for big money. Who remembers which wine, Dan? We talking about Boone's Farm. We talking about Mad Dog. We talking about. I'm trying to think of some of the ones. T-Bird. I'm trying to think a lot of them. My grandfather had a liquor store too, and there were a lot of winos that came in and bought a lot of cheap wine off of him. He sold more damn cheap wine than anything. Yeah, they don't want the soil to be all that great. Poor soil. Yes, it's crazy. You'd think that they'd want everything to be the best, but no, it's, I guess, the adverse environment, the adverse conditions, being pruned and stress the plant, and it's trying to produce to, you know, to you know, produce more vines and reproduce and stay alive. So T-Bird, yeah, there's all right. Let's see. The wine from the 70s came in a brown clay bottle. Now wait a minute, what T-Bird in a clay bottle? I might have to Google that question. I'm trying to think of clay bottle. I'm drawing a blank. But he owned that liquor store in the 70s and 80s. And he bought a car wash. All right, let's see, wine in Lancers. Let's see. There's one called Hillbilly Wine, Bendigo Pottery, but there was a Lancers wine. I bet it was at Lancers for sure. Lancers. Pretty interesting. I recognize it now that I see it, but I would have never guessed that in a million fucking years. But yeah, that's it. Lancers. I remember the bottle though. Once you see it, once you Google it, see the bottle, you'll definitely recognize it. That's crazy. I hadn't thought about seeing that in you. Ripple, yep. Boone's Farm, Wild Irish Rose, yep. There's another one I'm trying to think of. He sold a lot of. Yeah, it was Lancers. I couldn't remember either. I had to Google it. I'm doing good to remember shit, a lot of things. Hell, it took me a long time to come up with funnel. You know, just simple things like funnel and slobber box and you know, spear in a beer keg, the spear. Sometimes just getting old sucks, you know. TJ Swan, yeah, yeah. Let's bring back some memories. Still trying to think of that one. Might have been T Bird. Who said T Bird? Clint? That might have been it. He sold shit out of T Bird. That was one of his biggest sellers. But it was something. I wish he was around. Yeah, we talked about that Mickey's Big Mouth a while back. I used to love those ponies and them small ones, man. I wasn't a real big beer drinker, but we used to like driving around and kill the little ponies and then hit signs as we were driving down the road in the country. You know, we weren't in the city, the stop sign or anything, but we were out in the middle of nowhere. And I know it's polluting and I know it broke glass. I know I'm a sinner and I'm a bad person, but we had a lot of fun doing it. Yeah, bang. You know, it was a lot of fun. Silly shit we do for fun, man. We had nothing better to do. Nothing better to do to entertain ourselves. You know, that's what growing up in the country's like. But I wouldn't trade my childhood for nothing. You know, I look back at all the memories I shared with all my friends. Hell, half of them are gone, but most of the wild ones are gone. And a lot of them are still surprised I'm still around, you know. It's something when you run into an old friend, they're like, damn, you're still alive? I figured you must have died years ago. TJ Swan, another big back then. Green bottle. And a lot of blacks drinking. Well, there's a lot of blacks going to my grandpa's liquor store. A lot of winos, black and white. I guess he probably had about half and half. There's a lot of white winos back in too here in Lexington. But T-Bird might have been T-Bird. Green bottle. Let me think about that. I'm still trying to think of the one that he sold a lot of that we haven't mentioned yet. I'll have to Google cheap wines. Cheap wines from the 70s. I'm hoping. No, that's all. That's all considered expensive. Hmm. Oh hell! Come on, Google. That shit's expensive. I'm talking the cheap shit. And not like Martini and Rossi and all that. Here we go. Yeah, here we go. No, it wasn't Boone's Farm Cisco, Mad Dog, Night Train, Thunderbird, Wild Irish Road Dripper. No. But all those are in the same damn line is what I'm trying to think of. He did sell a lot of T-Bird though. He did. He sold a lot of T-Bird. Let's see. I don't remember the Cisco. Martini and Rossi. No, that's expensive shit compared to this stuff. The green bottle you're thinking of might be this. Did it have like a an odd shape like that, like a boat or some buildings on it? An old Matthias. I'm looking at one of those, and I remember that from back in the day. But I never considered that a cheap one. It's spelled Mateus, Matthias. And I do remember that bottle from back in the day, but I don't remember that being necessarily a cheap one. That's all T-Bird. Let's see. Oh, hell, that's getting into good stuff. Hmm. You know what happened? I'll log off of this damn podcast and I'll go upstairs, use the bathroom. About the time I'm done, I'll hit my finger will touch the damn commode and it'll come to me and I'm like, God damn it, you know. But it was a common one. Just like the ones that Clint was talking about. It was a lot like those, but it was I just can't think of the name. And it was a common name. What's going on, Monty? Been pretty good. How about yourself, brother? Good to see you. Yeah, we on here late. No, it wasn't Night Train. We're trying to talking about some of these old wines from the old days, back in the day in the 70s and 80s that were cheap as hell that everybody drank. No, Cold Duck. I do remember that was my first memory of drinking alcohol was Cold Duck. My aunt loved Cold Duck. Well, my aunt, my mom, and probably my uncles and grandparents. My grandmother, my grandpa didn't drink, but grandmother and neither one of my grandfathers drank. But well, now he drank a beer, and he liked near beer. When he got older, he'd drink a beer. That's right. But never really. I never saw him drink to excess or get drunk, but he liked to have a beer with his meal, and he poured salt in it. And I remember that he'd pour salt in it, let it foam, and pour a little more salt. And he'd do that a few times, and he'd drink that salty beer. And when he got older, he drank the non-alcoholic beer. But I never understood the salt thing. It must have been. But anyway, they were drinking Cold Duck, and there's a big old glass sitting there. You know, I've been out playing all day. I'm probably 6. You know, been out playing all day, hot as hell. Came in, I thought it was grape juice because they always kept some, grape juice. I love grape juice, and they always had grape juice. And I thought it was just grape juice, and I was hot, and I chugged that damn thing down, man. And before I realized it was bitter and not sweet, and it was Cold Duck and not, man, I was like, that was my first drink of alcohol, and I didn't like it. That's probably why I didn't drink a lot of wine growing up. Yeah, he salted his beer down slowly. Yeah, I miss my old grandpa. He was a good man. He was a coal miner when he was younger and got into oil excavation and exploration, I should say, oil exploration for a company when he got older and did pretty well with that too. And that's what it was, Matthias. But yeah, my dad was always busy and my grandpa, he'd take me hunting and fishing, and he had a little more spare time than my dad did, and he'd take me out and hunting and fishing a lot, and did a lot of things together, and go back, walk into the old mines. He loved going back in them old mines and looking at them and how they were reclaiming them and stuff. And do you? Yeah, but yeah. We had a good time. My grandpa and me, man. I miss him. He's a good one. He farmed a lot too. He helped a lot of people out. But later in life, in his retirement, I guess he decided to retire and then realized he didn't have enough money to retire. So he took some of his retirement money and bought a liquor store, and did real well at the liquor store, and decided to buy a car wash. And car wash did okay, but it wasn't a big, huge money maker for him. But both of those businesses did him pretty well, where he could retire. But yeah, he was ready to retire and realized, wait a minute, he didn't have enough money. Wasn't quite enough. He got black lung, for his disability and stuff. Where he worked in the mines back in the day before they really vented them well and stuff, old school type mining. So that affected his ability to walk when we walk in the mines and hunt and stuff. He couldn't go on without him to take a break. But I think that's one of the reasons he did it, just to stay in shape. I can't remember what that other wine was. It ain't no big deal, but it was one of those bigger sellers. It was kind of like a T-Bird, right along those same lines as a T-Bird. But I can't remember the name of it. It's a common name. And it wasn't like Martini and Rossi or Morgan and David. None of that. That was considered high dollar stuff compared to this. It was cheap. All right. Well, it's about 11:30. Been a good Saturday night. Wasn't real productive for the beginners, but Dan, come back Wednesday and we'll talk more, and hopefully we can find you, get you going and get you seasoned in and get you running. And I'm trying to think. I'm scrolling back, see at the beginning who our newbies were. Linda Patton, and there's Dan. So I couldn't remember Linda. So come back Wednesday, Dan, and yeah, I remember sitting in my dad's lap driving my first time. I was a kid. I was on the farm. Well, actually, this was on a farm that they also had a horse stables. My dad and uh, some other people like them Tennessee walking horses. They ride horses, so they had some show horses that they had and they like to ride. But Dan, come back Wednesday. We're here on Wednesdays and Saturdays at 8. We start at 8, same time, same bat channel. Wherever you seen us tonight, you can find us in. Uh, but do go to Philbilly's channel. I see that you're on YouTube. I'm not sure if you're on Philbilly's or the militia page, but go to Philbilly's and subscribe. That way you'll get a notification, because sometimes I don't get my Facebook notifications almost every time YouTube does. So they're pretty good about sending out notifications every time. But yeah, everybody here, everybody have a good weekend. Thanks for stopping in, spend your Saturday with us. And Dan, come back Wednesday and bring your questions. Now we'll go over everything from beginning to end. I'll try to hunt and find what edition it was that you can go back to and watch. I should have labeled them better when I did them, but there was an episode or two that I did beginning to end grain for beginners, and that'd be a great one to kind of go back and watch at your discretion whenever you get time to. But I'll try to hunt it down and find out what episode it was and what day it aired, so to help you narrow it down. It had been Wednesday or Saturday, and it wasn't. But how long ago, Clint? Maybe a month, two, not any more than 2 months ago. So yeah, we did a really good episode on beginning to end, and I'm going to try to mark that so people can go and watch it. And I can refer them to, beginners. Oh, I'm a first timer, I need to know. And I'm going to be like, all right, after this episode, we'll answer every question, but I want you to go back and watch this particular episode. So I think I can still rename them, but I'll find the date that it came, and I'll post it Wednesday. I'll try to make a note and remember to do that. Awesome, good deal, brother. Well, we'll see everybody on Wednesday. Until then, everybody have a great weekend and spend some time with family and friends and enjoy your weekend. And we'll see you all Wednesday at 8. Sign on, everybody. Peace out.